Hello everyone and welcome to the weird, scary and horrible parts of humanity. Firstly, a massive apologies for the delay in getting this video out. I've had a lot of job things and job related things going on which led to a delay in getting this video out. Previously, we had a look at all of the 9/11 hijackers, including the hijackers of American Airlines Flight 77, and then looked at the passengers and crew of American Airlines Flight 11. And today we will look at all of the passengers and crew of American Airlines Flight 77. Also, apologies for any mispronunciation because, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not American. American Airlines Flight 77 was a Boeing 757-223 registration N644AA, which departed from Washington Dulles International Airport at 8:20 a.m. from runway 30 bound for Los Angeles International Airport, California. Aboard were 64 individuals, with the aircraft only at 33% capacity, with American Airlines noting that for a Tuesday, the day of 9/11, this was a regular occupation rate for the flight. There were 53 passengers, 5 hijackers and 6 crew members aboard. At 8:51 a.m, the Boeing 757-223 was hijacked. Flying at 530 miles per hour or 850 kilometers per hour, Honey Hunjaw crashed the Boeing 757 into the Pentagon's western flank at 9:37 a.m. and 46 seconds. In addition to the 64 people aboard of American Airlines Flight 77, 125 people were killed in the Pentagon and 106 people in the Pentagon were injured. Starting with the cockpit, we will look at Captain Charles Burlingame. Charles Frank Burlingame III went by Chick and was born on the 12th of September 1949 in St. Paul, Minnesota, the son of Charles Frank Burlingame II, who went by Chuck, and Patricia Ann Burlingame née Meyer. Both would pass away in 1999 and 2000 respectively. His father was a World War II Navy veteran who later served as a non-commissioned officer in the US Air Force. He was one of 3 children, with a sister Deborah Burlingame, born in 1954, and a brother Bradley Meyer Burlingame, who went by Brad, born in 1952. Charles Frank Burlingame II was a member of the United States Air Force, leading to his children spending their childhood in England as well as California, where they would eventually settle down in Anaheim. He would attend Anaheim High School and was active in the Boy Scouts of America. He graduated from Anaheim High School in 1967. Burlingame then went on to attend the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Engineering in 1971. Serving in the Navy upon receiving his Naval Aviator wings, he flew at McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II jets produced between 1958 and 1981. It was retired from U.S. combat service in 1996 and U.S. target drone service in 2024. While 5,195 McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II jets were built, it only remains in active service with the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force. He flew as part of a strike fighter squadron VFA 103 based at the Naval Air Station in Oceana, Virginia, on board of the USS Saratoga CV-60, a Forrestal-class supercarrier decommissioned on the 20th of August 1994. He was an honor graduate of the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School Top Gun at NAS Miramar in California. In 1979, he left active duty with the Navy, but transferred to the U.S. Navy Reserve. He was recalled to active defense duties during the First Gulf War under Operation Desert Storm, which took place between the 17th of January 1991 and the 28th of February 1991, following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. In a great piece of irony, Burlingame worked in the Pentagon while in the Naval Reserve. He would eventually retire as captain from the Navy Reserve in 1996. He was awarded the Defense Superior Service Medal, the National Defense Service Medal with 1 Service Star, the Navy Sea Service Deployment Ribbon, the Navy and Marine Corps Overseas Service Ribbon with 1 Service Star, the Armed Forces Reserve Medal, the Navy Rifle Marksmanship Ribbon, and the Navy Expert Pistol Medal. It was while in the Navy that he would have his first and only child, Wendy Delise Burlingame, who would go on to become Wendy Delise Burlingame Patavina, who was born on the 17th of May 1974 in Kingsville, Kleberg County, Texas. Upon leaving the US Navy active duty in 1979, he started working with American Airlines as a pilot. However, in 1980, he was furloughed from American Airlines. The early 1980s were a difficult time for American Airlines, with the furloughing of between 10 and 11% of its staff, an estimated 6,650 employees between 1980 and 1981. After this, Burlingame went to work as a manager for Lockheed Aerospace. In 1984, however, he returned to fly for American Airlines. During his 22-year career with American Airlines, he captained the Boeing 727, 757 and 767. However, the design of the Boeing 757 and 767 are very similar, and to fly both necessitates only a short conversion course. He resided in Oak Hill, Virginia, and was based out of Washington Dulles International Airport. American Airlines has since closed its base, with Washington Dulles International Airport dominated by United Airlines, while American Airlines centralizes its operations for Washington, D.C. at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. He was married to Sherry Burlingame, who worked as a flight attendant for American Airlines. In 2000, he appeared on the Fox TV series Greed. Greed was a TV series airing on Fox and aired between the 4th of November 1999 and the 14th of July 2000 for one season and 44 episodes. It was hosted by Chuck Woolery and narrated by Mark Thompson. It was designed to compete against the then primetime juggernaut Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, hosted by Regis Philbin. The series did improve Fox's year-on-year performance in the same time slot, but struggled against Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and was cancelled by Fox after just 1 year. In the episode he appeared on, Burlingame won $10,000 after challenging an opponent to a Terminator showdown. The entirety of the episode of Greed that he appeared on is on YouTube.
Okay, hi Chick, how are you?
Chuck,
Good, nice to see you. Now you said you had 50 Secret Service agents on a flight of yours. You were obviously the pilot. What were these guys doing?
Well, I fly to Washington, D.C. a lot, and we're notified when we get officials like that on the airplane, and these were an advance team for the president heading down to Dallas-Fort Worth.
Oh, I see. Make you a little nervous?
Actually, I felt pretty secure with them on board.
Oh, I guess so.
Uniquely, when American Airlines Flight 77 was hijacked, there were no reports of anyone being stabbed or a bomb threat. Barbara Olson, an American lawyer and conservative commentator aboard American Airlines Flight 77, who we will come back to in a minute, called her husband aboard the hijacked Boeing 757 and asked on her mobile phone, "What do I tell the pilot to do?" suggesting that Burlingame and First Officer David Charlebois were forced to the back of the aircraft. Burlingame's remains were found amongst the Pentagon. Initially, he was deemed ineligible to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery, one of two cemeteries maintained by the United States Army, with nearly 400,000 military personnel buried in Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington County, Virginia. This was because he was not on active duty at the time, and simultaneously he was under the age of 60, aged 51 at the time of 9/11, and 1 day before his 52nd birthday. However, he was given a waiver and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, the same cemetery as where his parents are buried. Astronaut Frank Culbertson, who was commander of the International Space Station for almost 4 months in 2001 and the only US citizen not on Earth when 9/11 occurred, attended the United States Naval Academy with Burlingame. Culbertson witnessed and photographed the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks from space and played the TAPS bugle call on his trumpet at Burlingame's memorial service, having played the TAPS from space after 9/11. Burlingame's daughter, Wendy Dallas Patavina, née Burlingame, passed away on the 5th of December 2006 in Guttenberg, Hudson County, New Jersey. She died in a fire at the 50-story Galaxy residential complex in Guttenberg on the banks of the Hudson, trying to save her Jack Russell Terrier, Max, and her Dalmatian, Berkeley. The New York Post would report that the fire was caused by arson. She had moved to New York from Pittsburgh in November 2006 in order to live with her longtime boyfriend, Kevin Roderick. She is buried at St. Paul's Methodist Episcopal Church Cemetery in Port Republic, Atlantic County in New Jersey. Burlingame's brother, Brad, would pass away on the 8th of December 2015 in Los Angeles, California. Staying in the cockpit, we have First Officer David Michael Charlebois. Charlebois was born in Morocco on the 29th of August 1962. He lived with his family in Paris, France and Arlington, Virginia. American Airlines would note in 2021 that growing up across the world gave him a thirst for travel and adventure. He was the son of Roland Charlebois and Vivienne Charlebois. He had one brother, Donald, and a sister, Denise. He attended Yorktown High School, graduating in 1980 before attending Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University is a private university focused on aviation and aerospace programs. Based in Cincinnati, Ohio, it has campuses in Daytona Beach and Prescott, Arizona. It is ranked by US News and World Report as the 11th best regional university in the South and between 601 and 800 globally by the Times Higher Education University World Rankings. Charlebois began working as a corporate pilot in North Carolina before beginning his career as a commercial pilot, joining US Air in 1988. US Air would become known as US Airways in March 1997 before being merged into American Airlines on the 17th of October 2015. In 1991, he would join American Airlines. At the time of his passing, he had a Border Collie Spaniel mix named Chance, a stray dog, who he had owned for 8 years. His partner was Tom Hay, and he lived in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. He was described as a warm and friendly man who took pride in his job appearance and the life he built with his neighbour Travis White, stating he was handsome and happy and very centred. His life was the kind of life I wanted to have someday. He and Hay had met in 1988, and Charlebois would become a key proponent of the LGBTQIA+ community within American Airlines, including becoming an early member of the National Gay Pilots Association. Indeed, American Airlines ran their own piece on the 30th of June 2021, noting that Charlebois had fought for recognition as a gay man and had heralded through his actions with the National Gay Pilots Association a change to the company culture at American Airlines. It's worth pointing out that at the time, and more so when he and Hay met, there was still a stigmatization against homosexuality, and indeed the term LGB as a concept didn't even exist until the late 1980s. It was 13 and a half years after Charlebois' death that the US Supreme Court would legalize gay marriage on the 26th of June 2015. He passed away 2.5 years before the first gay marriage in the United States of America, which took place in Massachusetts on the 17th of May 2004, and it was not until Lawrence versus Taylor on the 26th of June 2003 that the final 14 states in the United States of America, Puerto Rico, and the US military decriminalized intimate consensual sex between two people of the same sex. Now we move on to the flight attendants. Now we have to mention Roberta Simeone, who was scheduled to fly aboard American Airlines Flight 77 as a flight attendant, but had to call off work due to an earache. She would note on the 22nd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the 11th of September 2023 that missing American Airlines Flight 77 and knowing that people that she worked with and laughed with were on board the flight had left her with post-traumatic stress disorder, telling WKBN-TV News, a CBS affiliate in Youngstown, Ohio, "I had plenty of counselling, but the horror never really goes away. It simply gets easier to handle with God's help." She has since retired from American Airlines and lives in Austintown, Ohio. Michelle Heidenberger, née MacDonald, was the purser aboard American Airlines Flight 77. Heidenberger was born in Melrose, Middlesex County in Massachusetts on the 17th of July 1949. She grew up in Windsor, Connecticut. In 1970, she began work as a flight attendant with American Airlines and was based in Chicago, Illinois. While there, she met Thomas Heidenberger, 3 years her senior, who she would marry in 1972. Thomas Heidenberger at the time of 9/11 was a captain for US Airways, having joined the company in 1977. Settling down in Chevy Chase, Maryland, she would have 2 children. Olson, born in 1981, who at the time of 9/11 was studying at Loyola University, and Thomas, born in 1987, who at the time of 9/11 was a freshman at Gonzaga College High School. Michelle Heidenberger was involved in many charities and devoted countless hours to work with charities, helping children including St. Anne's Infant and Maternity Home, the American Red Cross, Stone Ridge of the Sacred Heart, Master Dell, and the Gonzaga College High School. She also had a golden retriever puppy and loved working in her flower garden. Heidenberger primarily flew turnaround flights from Washington Dulles International Airport to Miami, Florida, which remains one of American Airlines' biggest bases, with American Airlines holding 68% of a market share in Miami, Florida. She was an incredible flight attendant, having received on the 12th of April 2001 the Professional Flight Attendant Award from American Airlines. By September 2001, however, she was wanting to gain more hours and thereby worked longer cross-country trips. This was so that she could take time off work and have a holiday in Europe. Hence, she was the purser aboard American Airlines Flight 77. On 9/11, Michelle Heidenberger headed to Washington Dulles International Airport, and she called her husband. The last words he said to her were, "Have a safe trip, and I'll talk to you when you get to Los Angeles." Following 9/11, her children did not want their father to go back to work with US Airways, but Thomas Heidenberger would tell Naples News Daily, "My kids didn't want me to go back to work, but I could not stay home for the simple reason that if we would have not gone back to work or gone back to our daily chores, the terrorists would have won." Michelle was famous for saying, "Get over it and move on." She was remembered fondly by her neighbours, with Ruby Rama telling the Washington Post, "I'm just so heartbroken. I just can't believe she won't be one of our neighbours." Moreover, neighbour Peter Dove would state she was a lovely lady. "We were such over-the-fence neighbours that we cut a gate in the fence." Thomas Heidenberger would continue to fly with US Airways after the passing of his wife and would retire as a captain in July 2006, having worked with US Airways for 29 years. In the same year, he led a team of amateur cyclists to cycle from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in order to raise money for memorials honouring the victims of 9/11. On the 8th of September 2011, he gave an interview to ABC 7 News, the ABC affiliate of Washington, D.C., stating how difficult it had been to live without his wife, having gone through a high school graduation to college graduation and his daughter's wedding, and had welcomed his first grandchild into the world without his wife. Jennifer Lewis, aged 38, was a flight attendant aboard American Airlines Flight 77, travelling along with her husband Kenneth Lewis, a fellow American Airlines flight attendant, who we will come back to in a minute. Jennifer Lewis Nee Gore was born on the 16th of October 1963 in Peterborough, Hillsborough County, New Hampshire. She had one brother, Barry Gore. She met her future husband, Kenneth Lewis, who went by Ken, at an American Airlines Christmas party in 1991. However, it took a while for him to realise how much he liked her. They were both at a Georgetown bar, and she said, "I think I know someone who's interested in you." And he replied, "Really? Who?" She kicked him underneath the table and yelled, "Moi." The two would marry in 1993. She loved horses, having had a Welsh pony when she was 4, and also loved playing practical jokes. A fellow American Airlines flight attendant, Mitch Hannon, recalled after 9/11 that she would bring a screwdriver to work and steal the handle off her colleagues' bags and hide them for 3 days, with Hannon stating, "Have you ever walked through Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport carrying your bag in your arm? It hurts." However, she loved travelling, and based on her seniority with American Airlines, both she and her husband were able to get flights together, and their favourite destination was Los Angeles. While in Los Angeles, both would rent a car during their 24-hour layover and drive 8 hours to Yosemite National Park or ride bikes along a beach. Their mutual friend Brent Payne, who owned a horse farm where Jennifer took riding lessons, would state that it was a match made in heaven. They were a devoted couple, and their families drew comfort in the fact that they were together protecting each other aboard American Airlines Flight 77 when she crashed into the Pentagon. A centergraph for both was constructed at the Gore Family Cemetery in Wilmington, Windham County, Vermont, with a horse above Jennifer's name. Kenneth Eugene Lewis, who went by Ken, was born on the 28th of February 1952 in Farmville, Prince Edward County, Virginia. He was the son of Joanne and Eugene Lewis. As of 9/11, both lived in Culpeper, Virginia. He graduated from Hampton Sydney College, a private liberal arts men's college in Hampton, Sydney, Virginia, the oldest privately chartered college in the southern United States, and the 10th oldest college in the United States of America. He loved golfing as well as travelling, with Los Angeles being his favourite destination, which he would travel to during a 24-hour layover with his wife, Jennifer Lewis, who was a fellow American Airlines flight attendant. The pair met at an American Airlines 1991 Christmas party and married in 1993. As an American Airlines flight attendant, his parents were able to travel in economy class for free, and he offered for the pair to travel with them when they worked. In the days before 9/11, he begged his parents to go to Los Angeles with them, but they had too many commitments on 9/11. After 9/11, his mother, Joanne Lewis, would note her regret for both not being on board the Boeing 757 with her son and daughter-in-law, stating, "Oh God, I wish we were on that trip. I'd rather be there with them than to be here without them." The brother of Jennifer Lewis remembered that when his mother was gravely ill, Kenneth gave him a big bear hug, and he would state to the Washington Post, "When I heard that the hijackers herded everyone to the back of a plane, I knew they were together and that Ken was giving her that same hug he gave me." This thought was shared by his cousin, Walter Carter, who stated, "I have no idea what their last moments on Earth may have been like, but I prefer to think of them in each other's arms, comforting each other as the plane hit the Pentagon." A centegraph for both was constructed at the Gore Family Cemetery in Wilmington, Windham County, Vermont, with a golfer above his name. On the 12th of September 2022, a monument to him at Hampton Sydney College was erected. Renee Ann May was born on the 13th of May 1962 in Buffalo in Erie County, New York. She was the daughter of Ronald May and Nancy May. At the time of 9/11, both lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. She was one of 3 children with 2 brothers, Kenneth May, who at the time of 9/11 lived in San Diego, California, as well as Jeffrey May, who lived in Las Vegas. May loved art and nature, which manifested through growing up in rural upstate New York. As a teenager, her parents relocated to Southern California, where she developed a love for swimming. She studied English language at San Diego State University. In 1988, she became a flight attendant with American Airlines, and in the early 1990s lived for a summer in Seoul, South Korea. At the time of 9/11, she lived in Baltimore, Maryland. May adored travelling and went on trips to Europe, South America, Canada, and the Caribbean. While working as a flight attendant with American Airlines, she also worked as a docent for the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, a public art museum in the Mount Vernon section of Baltimore, Maryland, founded in 1934. She was also close to her family and friends. She was not married at the time of 9/11 and had no children. However, she had one child who was miscarried. Now we move on to the passengers. Firstly, we have to give mention to Georgetown Hoya men's team coach John Thompson, the first African-American head coach to win a major collegiate championship in basketball when the Hoyas won the NCAA Division I National Championship in 1984. He would also play the Boston Celtics from 1964 to 1966 before becoming a coach of St. Anthony High School from 1966 to 1972 and the Georgetown Hoya from 1972 to 1999. He was scheduled to appear on Jim Rome's radio show, The Jim Rome Show, on the 12th of September 2001, but was planning on being in Las Vegas for a friend's birthday on the 13th of September, and initially insisted on traveling to the Jim Rome Show's Los Angeles studio on the 11th of September, leading to him being booked on American Airlines Flight 77. However, this did not work for the staff of the Jim Rome Show, who wanted him to travel on the day of the show, the 12th of September. After a staff member assured Thompson he would be able to travel from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, immediately after the recording of the show, he changed his travel plans to the 12th of September 2001, which would not come to pass because of 9/11. Thompson would tell ESPN Men's Basketball on the 12th of September 2011 that he felt the impact of a crash of American Airlines Flight 77 at his home, which was near the Pentagon. He would credit the CBS producer who changed his flight to the 12th of September 2001 with saving his life. Thompson would pass away on the 30th of August 2020. Dr. Paul Wesley Ambrose was seated in 17D in economy class, the only passenger in row 17 aboard the Boeing 757. Dr. Ambrose was born on the 26th of December 1968 in Huntington, Cable County in West Virginia. He grew up in Huntington and attended Marshall University and studied medicine, graduating in 1995. From 1995 to 1996, he served as the National Director of Legislative Affairs for the American Medical Student Association. He did his residency at Dartmouth Medical School, completing it in 1999, and received a master's degree in public health from Harvard University, graduating in 2000. While there, he was named a Luther Terry Fellow of the Association of Teachers of Preventative Medicine and served as a senior advisor to the U.S. Surgeon General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Most of his patients were Salvadorian immigrants, and he gained an interest in the culture of Spain, having studied there for a year. He also focused his work on the Lincoln County Breast Cancer Prevention Project, a community-based project in West Virginia, which aimed to increase the use of mammography services by rural women. He also focused on curbing the epidemic of childhood obesity in the United States of America. In December 2000, he got a 10-week-old English Mastiff named Chomsky. He was an avid rock climber and did regular workouts. He was engaged to Bianca Angelino, having proposed to her 3 weeks before 9/11, and was due to get married to her in Madrid, Spain in September 2002. At the time of 9/11, he lived in Georgetown. Dr. Ambrose was traveling to Los Angeles to attend a conference on childhood obesity in the United States of America. The Paul Ambrose Trail for Health was created in Huntington as a walking, running and biking trail that runs 20 miles through Huntington and the surrounding area. An endowed fund in his name helped to fund a trip for medical centers studying at Marshall University and allowed them to travel to Honduras to provide medical care. Dr. Yene Betru was seated in seat 15A in economy class. Dr. Betru was born on the 21st of January 1966 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He was the son of Betru Wolde Tensei and Sarah Teshaberu. He had two brothers, Sirak Betru and Aaron Betru, and one sister, Ruth Betru. He was the eldest brother. He immigrated to the United States of America in 1982 with the dream of becoming a physician. He attended Abbey School in Colorado before attending college at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California. Dr. Betru would then attend the medical school at the University of Michigan, completing his residency at Los Angeles County USC Medical Center. From 1998 until his death, he worked as the Director of Medical Affairs for IPC, the hospitalist company now called the IPC Healthcare Inc., which is based in Burbank, California. Ultimately, he tried to take his skills back to Ethiopia when in June 1998 he flew back to his native Ethiopia to try and help doctors save his dying grandmother, but was unsuccessful. In the week before 9/11, he went to marry a young Ethiopian woman named Zelalem, and on the 10th of September 2001, the couple arrived in the United States of America from Ethiopia, going to Washington, D.C. to visit Zelalem's sister, who lived in Washington, D.C. Ecstatically, he told his supervisor during a phone call late on Monday, the 10th of September 2001, Dr. Timothy Pendleton, "My lady is with me." Determined to get back to work, he hopped aboard American Airlines Flight 77 to head back to work at the IPC, the hospitalist community in Burbank, leaving his wife in Washington, D.C. to stay with her sister. He was one of 3 Ethiopian citizens killed on 9/11. Just before the 15th anniversary of 9/11, on the 8th of September 2016, his brother, Sirak Betru, who lived in Maryland at the time, told the Los Angeles Daily News that he felt every day the missing of his brother. He said that his dad had passed away prematurely in early 2016 because his father's health went down after Dr. Petru passed away, and his mother's heart was also broken from the passing of her son. He also remembered that his brother was one of the nicest people that you could ever meet, very generous, a hard worker, loved his family and wanted to make a difference in the world. It's very, very sad that something this tragic happened to such a good person. We don't understand why it had to happen to him. Mary Jane Boothney Hauser, who went by MJ, was seated in seat 1E in first class, directly opposite hijacker Honey Hunjaws seated in seat 1B, and one of 3 hijackers on board American Airlines Flight 77 seated in first class. Booth was born on the 18th of November 1936 in Washington, D.C. At the time of 9/11, she lived in Falls Church, Virginia. She had one sister, Nancy. Nancy, at the time of 9/11, was married to Ted Kimball, and both lived in Dallas, Texas, and had 2 children, Kendra and Keith. She was previously married to James Houston Booth Jr., a former U.S. Army veteran who served between the 12th of December 1961 and the 21st of October 1964. Booth never had any children, but she had a yellow Labrador retriever named Addie and treated the dog as if it was a child. She had always lived in Northern Virginia, growing up in Arlington, and settled down in Falls Church. For 45 years she worked for American Airlines and spent more than 30 years as the secretary to American Airlines General Manager at Washington Dulles International Airport, Keith Merlin. She was beloved at Washington Dulles International Airport, with Merlin stating that she was the friendly glue that kept everyone together. She'd take you under her wing and teach you the airline business. Her colleague Dennis Hazel would state that at Washington Dulles International Airport she was a mother to everyone, and people began to think of her as a mother. Indeed, the Washington Post stated that she was known to almost everyone in Washington Dulles International Airport. The wife of former American Airlines colleague Marcia Bernacat, Olivier Bernacat, would note, "Although we left the American family some years ago, we will always remember your smiling face, MJ, and will keep you and your family in our prayers, always." Booth was known by MJ to all of her colleagues except at the annual American Airlines Christmas party, when she dressed as Mrs. Santa Claus, and everyone called her Mrs. Santa Claus. She was heading to Las Vegas, Nevada to attend a meeting of the Employees Credit Union. To this day, American Airlines does not fly direct from Washington Dulles International Airport to Las Vegas. Indeed, now American Airlines flies only from Washington Dulles International Airport to Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, and it has centered much of its operations on Washington Ronald Reagan National Airport, from which it flies direct to Las Vegas. As a result, she had to fly to Los Angeles International Airport and take a connecting flight to Las Vegas, Nevada. A memorial to her was added to her husband's grave at Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington County, Virginia. Bernard Curtis Brown II was seated in seat 20E in economy class. He was born on the 19th of June 1990 in Tampa, Florida. He was the son of Bernard Brown I, who was a Navy Chief Petty Officer, as well as Sinita Brown. He was a student at Leckie Elementary School. He was travelling along with his teacher, Hilda Taylor. Both were travelling to the Channel Islands, located off Santa Barbara, California, for an ecology conference as part of a photo camp sponsored by National Geographic. This was to be a 4-day trip. He was travelling with teachers James Dubinier as well as Sarah Clark, National Geographic staffers Joan Ferguson and Anne Judge, as well as fellow students Asia Cottam and Rodney Dickens. His mother, Sinita, noted that he loved school, stating he lived to go to school. If he was sick, he would always say he was feeling better so he could go to school. Indeed, he was also loved by his teachers, with his teacher in the previous year during the 5th grade, Estella Cleveland, stating he was fun-loving. He was the joy of the class. Brown also loved basketball, both playing and watching. He had a new pair of Air Jordan basketball shoes and was wearing them aboard American Airlines Flight 77. His dream was to become like Michael Jordan. On the 21st of December 2001, his father participated in a ceremony to honour the victims of 9/11 held at the Pentagon by the Salt Lake Organizing Committee for the 2002 Olympic Winter Games in Salt Lake City, and his father held an Olympic torch as part of the Olympic torch relay as the torch made her way to Salt Lake City for the Winter Olympics. Suzanne Marie Cully, who went by Tigger, was seated in seat 4E in first class. She was born on the 17th of September 1957 in Auburn, Placer County, California, and lived in San Martin, California. She was married to her husband, Frank Jensen, and having married him on the 12th of September 1981, they had no children but had 2 Labrador retrievers, Hershey and Bandit, who, according to Frank, were her children, and she loved them more than life itself. Cully loved to travel and had travelled with Frank Jensen all over the world. She was a master scuba diver instructor and along with her husband taught diving lessons in Mari-Raee, California and led dive trips all over the world. She also loved skiing. She had worked in the high-tech arena for 15 years and was a manager of strategic alliances in Cisco Systems in San Jose, California. She was flying back from a business trip in Washington, D.C. Jensen would remarry in 2004 and moved from San Martin in 2009 to Chico, California, where he works as a pilot. He has visited the Pentagon 1 month, 1 year, and 3 years after 9/11. William Edward Caswell was seated in seat 10A in economy class, the only passenger in row 10. He was born in Boston, Massachusetts on the 22nd of June 1947 and was the eldest of 6 children. He was the son of Randall Caswell and Jean M. Caswell. Caswell was married to his wife, Jean Caswell. At the time, he lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, and they had a daughter. He loved games including chess, bridge, volleyball, soccer, tennis, squash, and had just taken up pool. Caswell also loved to play go-and-do cryptic crosswords and was a great dancer. In high school, he became a scholar and attended the University of Maryland and graduated Phi Beta Kappa in 3 years, graduating in 1968. He was then accepted into Princeton University to study physics in graduate school, but his studies were delayed when he was drafted into the Army during the Vietnam War. Following the end of the Vietnam War, he resumed his studies at Princeton University, choosing to specialize in elementary practical theory, receiving his PhD in physics in January 1975. His 1974 PhD thesis, under thesis advisor Curtis Cullen, would analyse the summation of Feynman loops in order to calculate elementary particle properties. Caswell primarily worked on quantum gauge theory as well as working with Canadian-American theoretical physicist Gerard Peter Lepage in 1978 in developing new powerful tools for dealing with bound states such as positonium and charmonium. From 1977 to 1979, he was an assistant professor at Brown University, becoming an assistant professor at the University of Maryland from 1979 to 1983. In 1983, he worked as a civilian scientist in the Naval Surface Weapons Center at White Oak, Maryland. In 1985, he would join a major classified defense technology project and ended up directing a team of more than 100 scientists. At the time of 9/11, he was still working for the US Navy. On 9/11, he called his wife Jean from his car on the way to the airport. He was traveling to Los Angeles on a business trip. His remains were found and he was buried at the Baltimore National Cemetery. His father, Randall Caswell, would state, "He was happy, very happy in this world. It is a shame to lose him." At the time, he had 4 sisters, all of whom were alive. His parents were involved in designing a memorial to 9/11 victims in Rockville, Maryland. Sarah Clark was seated in seat 25D in economy class. She was born on the 4th of April 1936 in Gastonia, Gaston County, North Carolina. She received a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Winston-Salem State University, a public, historically African-American university in Winston-Salem in North Carolina, which is part of the University of North Carolina. Clark then attended the George Washington University, gaining a master's degree in urban learning. Since 1965, she had taught elementary school in public schools in Washington, D.C., and at the time of 9/11 was a 6th grade teacher at Bacchus Middle School. She had 2 adult children and was engaged to John Milton Wellesley, who she had known as a friend since 1981, and they had been dating since 1994. On the 9th of September 2001, they went shopping for wedding bands. She read the Bible every morning. On the night of September the 10th, 2001, she discussed places where they would hold their wedding reception. On the morning of 9/11, she kissed and embraced Wesley in their Columbia home and said, "I love you," and headed for Washington Dulles International Airport. Wesley noticed that she had left her yellow jacket near the stairway and ran out to give it to her, but she had already gone. She left her engagement ring upstairs as she did not want to take it with her on board American Airlines Flight 77. Clark was chaperoning a group of elementary school children to the Channel Islands, located off Santa Barbara, California, for an ecology conference as part of a photo camp sponsored by National Geographic. This was to be a 4-day trip. She was travelling with fellow teachers James Debanure and Hilda Taylor, National Geographic staffers Joe Ferguson and Anne Judge, as well as students Asia Cottam, Rodney Dickens and Bernard Brown II. On the 7th of September 2011, John Milton Wesley would tell WAMU 88.5 that he had struggled without Clark and talked about her with tears rolling down his eyes. He also told WJZ News in 2019 that losing her was a sobering experience. Wesley would continue things that he did with Clark on a daily basis, including reading the Bible every morning, and said that he missed her most when he was at church. He also told the Baltimore Sun that he had become closer to his stepchildren as a result of her death, and he continues to keep a picture of her on his piano keyboard. He became close to a woman named Gladys, and in 2009 he had a dream in which Clark appeared, and he said she was laughing and smiling and talked to me about, "You look good." Wesley saw this as a validation that she had given him permission for him to be with Gladys. Asia Sivan Cottam was seated in seat 25E in economy class. Cottam was born on the 13th of January 1990 in Silver Spring, Montgomery County in Maryland. She was the daughter of Michelle Cottam and Clifton Cottam. Aged 11 at the time of 9/11, Cottam had just started her 6th grade school year at Bertie Backus Middle School and was chosen to attend a National Geographic Society conference at the Channel Islands, located off Santa Barbara, California, for an ecology conference as part of a photo camp sponsored by National Geographic. This was to be a 4-day trip. She was described as a kind-hearted girl who helped other students with learning difficulties. She was one of 8 children killed on 9/11. Her father worked at the school as an aide, helped to coach basketball, patrolled the halls, and served as a book clerk. She was travelling along with her teacher Sarah Clark, who was seated next to her. In 2002, the Asia Sivan Cottam Scholarship Fund was founded in her honour to establish a scholarship for children, having provided $250,000 in scholarships into maths, science, engineering and technology. On the 11th of September 2014, her parents released the book, Asia's New Wings, the untold story of a young girl lost in 9/11. In late 2014, her parents met with 9/11 Memorial Museum curators in New York City and donated her Winnie the Pooh earmuffs and other personal items, with the earmuffs on view in the memorial exhibition at the 9/11 Memorial Museum. James Daniel Debanure was seated in seat 27C in economy class. Despite the Boeing 757 going back to row 34, this was the last row occupied on board the aircraft. Debanure was born on the 31st of August 1943 in Whiteville, Columbus County in North Carolina. The son of Sadie Virginia Debanure, he was raised by his grandmother, Harry Green. He had one brother, Billy Pankey. He completed his high school in Whiteville, North Carolina, before graduating with a BA in psychology and a minor in sociology from Johnson C. Smith University in 1966. Debanure was an active member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, the Johnson C. Smith Choir, and the Appreciation Singing Group. Upon graduation, he worked as a testing specialist at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education before joining the Celanese Corporation as an equal opportunity specialist. In 1968, he would marry Frances Jard and, as a result, would raise his stepson DeForest B. Pratt II and would have a son, Jacques Debanure. In 1969, he uprooted his family to Washington, D.C., working for Celanese Corporation before joining C&P Telephone Company. With his first marriage ending in divorce, he would marry Linda D. Davis, who he met while working at the Army Times. They would have one child, Jalin Danielle Debanure, born in 1981. CGTN America would describe her father as a world. His second wife, Linda D. Davis, would pass away in 1985. He then left the Army Times to co-own and operate an upholstery and drapery shop with his mother-in-law, Ruth Leah. On the 14th of July 1985, he would become a member of the First Baptist Church of Highland Park. However, throughout his life, he had a love for education and ended up going into elementary school teaching, becoming a 5th grade teacher at Ketchum Elementary School in Washington, D.C. He devoted his time to sports, educational trips, and student safety patrolling, with his mother-in-law Ruth Leah stating that he was more of a mentor than a teacher. He was travelling with fellow teachers Sarah Clark and Hilda Taylor, National Geographic staffers Joe Ferguson and Ann Judge, as well as students Asia Cottam, Rodney Dickens, and Bernard Brown II. They were travelling as part of a National Geographic Society conference to the Channel Islands, located off Santa Barbara, California, for an ecology conference as part of a photo camp sponsored by National Geographic. This was to be a 4-day trip. He loved golfing and collecting black art. On 9/11, his daughter said to her father, "I'll see you later," and gave him a really big hug, and he said, "I'll make sure I call you when I get there." Jalin found out about 9/11 on the radio, remembering the flight numbers, and her father had written the flight number down that he was travelling on. She would tell Tunnel to Towers Foundation that 9/11 changed her outlook on life, and she no longer takes a single moment for granted. She would go on to become a motivational speaker using the preface of 9/11 and how it affected her life. Jalin would visit Guantanamo Bay and sit in for a week of pre-trial hearings. On the 10th of September 2004, the Debanure Dickens Resource Centre, named in honour of James Debanure and the student he was travelling with, Rodney Dickens, who we'll come back to in a minute, was unveiled at Ketchum Elementary School. In 2021, on the 10th of September, a memorial was unveiled in his honour at Ketchum Elementary School, which was presented by his daughter, Jalin. A memorial tree was also planted 2 years ago in memory of him on the school's front lawn. Rodney Dickens was seated in seat 27A in economy class with his fellow teacher James Debanure, who was on the aisle of the row in seat 27 Soy. He was travelling with teachers Debanure, Sarah Clark and Hilda Taylor, National Geographic staffers Joe Ferguson and Ann Judge, as well as students Asia Cottam and Bernard Brown II. They were travelling as part of a National Geographic Society conference to the Channel Islands, located off Santa Barbara, California, for an ecology conference as part of a photo camp sponsored by National Geographic. This was to be a 4-day trip. Rodney Dickens was born on the 20th of February 1990 in Washington, D.C. He had 2 sisters, one a year older and one a year younger, as well as a brother aged 6 and another brother aged 4. He grew up in a tough area of Washington, D.C. in Congress Heights. He was an honor roll student at Ketchum Elementary School. Dickens loved reading, playing computer games, and playing with his siblings. He also loved watching professional wrestling with his aunt, Cynthia Dickens, stating to the Washington Post, "I don't care what he was doing. He made it home to see wrestling." Eddie Dillard was seated in seat 5B in first class, directly opposite hijacker Nawaf al-Hazmir. Dillard was born on the 18th of May 1947 in Hurtsboro, Russell County, Alabama. He was the son of Major Dillard and Emma Lewis Dillard. He had 2 brothers, Andy Dillard and Lillian Dillard, as well as one sister, Rosetta Hefner. The family moved to East Chicago before settling down in Gary, Indiana. He graduated from Gary, Indiana Public School before attending Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee, before being transferred to Bishop College in 1969, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in History. While there, he was a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. He then moved to Dallas, Texas, where he worked with the Southland Corporation. While there, he met a woman named Rosemary in 1972, and they became friends. Southland Corporation then transferred him to Denver, Colorado, before he settled down in Seattle, Washington. He then opened his 7-Eleven store in East Palo Alto, California. In 1978, he went to work for Philip Morris and rose up to become a district manager. He rekindled his friendship with Rosemary, and they would marry on the 14th of June 1986. He would go on to have one child, Edric L. Dillard, in 1987, who would settle down in Dallas, Texas, where he lived with his mother. In 1997, he retired after 19 years with Philip Morris, but then turned to real estate, buying and selling properties throughout the United States of America. He loved collecting newspapers, history, golf, dominoes, and bidwhist. He was on board American Airlines Flight 77 to travel to Los Angeles to paint a house he owned. His parents and siblings would all outlive him. In 2004, a number of his family members sued American Airlines for negligence lawsuits. While this was dismissed by the Manhattan Federal Court, American Airlines made the families, as they brought the case against American Airlines, pay for the legal fees. One of the most prolific complainers against this was Rosemary Dillard, who told the New York Post, "I think everybody should boycott American Airlines. How can they have the audacity to ask the families to pay their attorneys' fees?" Charles Albert Droz III was seated in seat 9C in the first row of economy class. Droz was born on the 19th of February 1949 in Sewickley, Allegheny County in Pennsylvania. He went by Chuck. He was married to Sinead and had one daughter, Shannon. Droz received a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Grove City College before getting a Master's of Science in Electrical Engineering at the Naval Postgraduate School. He spent 20 years with the Navy, retiring as a lieutenant commander. Droz went on to join EM Solutions in 1993, undertaking system engineering consulting as well as developing an ARPA project demonstrating rapid object-oriented application development. He was given a full military burial at Arlington National Cemetery. Barbara G. Edwards nee van der Baan was seated in seat 22F in economy class. Edwards was born on the 5th of April 1943 in Frankfurt in what was then Nazi Germany. She was the daughter of Lizzie van der Baan with a stepfather Jack and had one sister, Jane Golan. When she was 10 years old, her family moved to Michigan. She then lived in Bloomington, Indiana. Edwards would become a cheerleader in high school and a runner-up in a homecoming queen contest. She graduated from Western Michigan University. She would marry Doug Edwards in the early 1970s before they divorced in the early 1990s. She taught French and German at Palo Verde High School in Las Vegas, Nevada, having joined the school in 1997. She was also an advisor to Palo Verde's International Club. She also taught French and German at Clark County Community College, now the College of Southern Nevada, in Las Vegas, Nevada. She was the only full-time resident of Las Vegas to die on 9/11. Edwards had attended a wedding in Connecticut, visiting her son, Doug Edwards, in New Jersey, and the farm of friends Darlene and Bud Flagg, who were flying with her, and we will come back to them in a minute. The Flaggs were from Millwood, Virginia. The trio sat together in row 22. The trio would fly to Los Angeles to get a connecting flight to Las Vegas. She had 3 children, Doug Edwards, Captain Scott Edwards, who was a Marine pilot and lived in Beaufort, South Carolina, and Mike Edwards, who was in the Marines and lived in San Diego, California. She also had one grandson, Scott Jr. Edwards' parents would outlive her. A memorial tour took place on the 12th of September 2001 at Palo Verde High School, with a memorial built in her honour at the school. On the 11th of September 2003, the Barbara G. Edwards 9/11 Memorial was dedicated to her at the southeastern corner of the soccer field of Clark County Community College. A flag was raised by the Air Force ROTC unit that had flown over both the US Capitol and Pentagon, with the flag given to the Edwards family. A foreign language scholarship was dedicated in her honour at Clark County Community College. Following the death of Osama bin Laden on the 2nd of May 2011, her father would tell M Live that the death of bin Laden brought a measure of justice and made him feel better, even if it didn't bring back his daughter. A ceremony was held for her on the 10th of September 2021, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, at Palo Verde High School, and her son, Scott Edwards, now based in Dallas, Texas, would tell the Las Vegas Review-Journal, "I think she would be blown away and grateful, but I also think she would say, 'Oh, you guys don't have to do this for me.'" He also described his mother as a fun-loving and joyous person. A headstone was erected to her at her parents' grave at Lakeview Cemetery in Michigan. Palo Verde High School continues to honour her on a yearly basis, with the last tribute to her taking place on the 8th of September 2023, with the school's Air Force JROTC leading the tribute ceremony, with the school choir and the flag left at half-mast. Charles Stevens Falkenberg was seated in seat 23A in economy class. Falkenberg was born on the 12th of July 1956 in Denver, Colorado. He was the son of Janice Falkenberg and Bill Falkenberg. He had one brother, Chris, and a sister, Ruth. He was married to Leslie Ann Falkenberg, nee Whittington, who was born in 1955. However, she would go by Whittington, and indeed was on board American Airlines Flight 77 as Whittington. They had two children, Zoe Elizabeth Falkenberg, born in 1992, and Dan Christine Falkenberg, born in 1998. The four were flying aboard American Airlines Flight 77, and we will come back to his wife and two children in a bit. They were travelling aboard American Airlines Flight 77 to connect onto a Qantas flight to Australia, with Leslie working as a visiting scholar for a 2-month fellowship at the Australian National University, ANU, in Canberra, Australia's capital. Falkenberg had taken leave from work to turn this into a family adventure. Traditionally, ANU was always the #1 university in Australia. However, today it is ranked as the 4th best university in Australia and the 34th best university globally in the world by the QS 2024 University World Rankings. To this day, Canberra does not have any direct flights to the United States of America. Indeed, the only direct international flights from Canberra are to Bali in Indonesia as well as Nadi in Fiji, necessitating the four connecting in Los Angeles to take a Qantas flight to Sydney, followed by another Qantas flight to Canberra, with ABC News Australia reporting that the entire flight would take 22 hours. If you saw the video on American Airlines Flight 11, as seen when we analysed Laura Lee Morabito and Alberto Dominguez, Qantas and American Airlines continue to have a very strong relationship as codeshare partners, with both airlines still codesharing on numerous flights and both founding members of a One World Alliance. To this day, Qantas does not fly to Washington, D.C., and as of 9/11, flights from the United States of America to Australia were operated in a duopoly between Qantas and United. Hence, if you fly Qantas while in mainland America, the airline flies you to Los Angeles, California, San Francisco, California, Dallas, Texas, and New York. If you go to Washington, D.C., they will put you for at least part of a flight on board an American Airlines flight. And while today American Airlines does fly from Los Angeles to Sydney, if you want to go to Canberra, you will be put on board a Qantas or Qantas Link flight. Hence, the Falkenberg family were flying American Airlines Flight 77 and then connecting on a Qantas flight in Los Angeles. Attending East High School, he met Leslie, and the pair would marry in 1984. He attended the University of Maryland College Park, gaining a Bachelor of Science and Master's of Science degree, graduating at the top of his class. He would go on to become a faculty research scientist at the University of Maryland College Park. Falkenberg was a gifted software engineer and scientist, developing software for scientific data management. He managed NASA-related databases and was a director of research for Ecologic Corporation based in Herndon, Virginia. At the time, he lived in University Park, Maryland. ABC News Australia would report that Falkenberg was an avid reader. He was also a devoted father, community activist, and volunteered for the PTA and Adelphi Dolphin Swim Club. Falkenberg's remains were found, and he was buried at Mount Olive Catholic Cemetery in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. Seated in seat 23C was Dana Christine Falkenberg, aged just 3 at the time of 9/11, one of 8 children killed on 9/11. She was born on the 21st of July 1998 in University Park, Maryland, where she resided at the time. She shared the same birthday as her grandfather, Bill Falkenberg, on her father's side, who lived in Denver, Colorado. The family celebrated her 8th birthday on the 21st of July 2001, her last birthday. Dana was a robust girl who was seen as a miracle by her parents and was described by those who knew her as intense, funny, and a charmer. Along with her sister, she was the centre of her parents' lives. Her remains were never found. Her aunt, Sarah Guest, on her mother's side, told ABC News Australia on the 10th of September 2021, "At first, that was a little wrenching, but she believed that her remains were mixed in with her parents, who she was flying with, and she took comfort in it." Seated in between her baby sister and her dad was Zoe Elizabeth Falkenberg, seated in seat 23B in economy class. Falkenberg was born on the 8th of November 1992 in University Park, Maryland. She was one of 8 children killed on 9/11. She was a top student at University Park Elementary School and active in the Girl Scouts. ballet and swim team. She was in the school's production of Brigadoon in 2000 and a local production of The King and I. Falkenberg was loved by her friends, teammates, teachers, and the parents of her friends. Her teacher remembered that she loved to read, especially Harry Potter. At the time of 9/11, only the first 4 books of Harry Potter had come out. She planned to have a joint Beanie Babies party with her friend Katie when she returned from Australia. John Heidenberger wrote in Business Insider on the 10th of September 2021 that while he was not close to Zoe Falkenberg, as he was in the 7th grade at the time of her death hit him like a brick, as both had been together in the production of Brigadoon in 2000. He would write in Business Insider, "Her death hit me like a brick. I cried myself to sleep that night. My teenage brain could not comprehend why anyone would want to kill such a sweet, adorable little girl." Stuffed animals belonging to the Falkenberg children were maintained at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in New York. Her remains were found and she is buried at Mount Olivet Catholic Cemetery in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. As I mentioned, Leslie Falkenberg was travelling under the name Whittington, so we will come back to the mother of the Falkenberg family later in the video. James Joseph Ferguson was seated in seat 26D in economy class. He was born on the 23rd of July 1962 in Canton, Madison County, Mississippi. He grew up in Durant, Mississippi. He became known by his middle name Joe and had one brother, Randy. Attending the University of Southern Mississippi, he commenced graduate studies at Ohio University, but undertook an internship at National Geographic, which turned into a 14-year career. By 9/11, he was director of the National Geographic Society's Geography Education Outreach Program, which led to him being on board American Airlines Flight 77, as his main role was to develop educational programs for schools and take kids on field trips. He loved to dance and had a great sense of wit. On the morning of 9/11, he said to his mum, Barbara Harrell, that he would call her when he got to California. Darlene Ellen Flagg, née Embraer, was seated in seat 22E in economy class. She was born in Riverside County in California on the 22nd of October 1938. She was married to Wilson Flagg, who was seated next to her in seat 22D. Wilson went by Bud, and we will come back to him in a minute. They were travelling to a family retreat in California. She had one sister, Doris Coelher, née Embraer. She attended Corona High School in Corona, California, graduating in 1956. She then attended the University of California in Santa Barbara, graduating in 1960. Pursuing a career in teaching, Flagg taught in Annapolis, Maryland. While in high school, she met Wilson, who she married in June 1961, following his graduation from the U.S. Naval Academy in June 1961. Due to her husband's military career, they lived across the country, including in Mississippi, California, and Connecticut. In the early 1990s, they would settle down at Daybreak Farm, a Black Angus beef cattle farm in Millwood, Virginia. They also owned a home in Las Vegas, Nevada. She had 2 children, Mark, who lived in Boca Raton, Florida at the time, and Michael, who lived in Clark County, Virginia, and went on to have 4 grandchildren, Elizabeth, Mitchell, Michael, and Natalie. A member of the Blue Ridge Hunt Club and Greenway Garden Club of Clark County, she was active at the Grace Evangelical Lutheran Church in Winchester, Virginia, and was an active artist and involved in fostering children's artistic talent. She also loved art like designing cards and calligraphy. They were seated next to Barbara Edwards in seat 22F, with whom they were travelling, with Edwards headed back to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she lived. Wilson Flagg, who went by Bud, was seated next to his wife, Darlene Flagg, in seat 22D in economy class. Travelling with their friend Barbara Edwards, they were going to a family reunion in California, with Edwards heading back to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she lived. Born on the 25th of October 1938 in Long Beach in Los Angeles County, California. He was the son of Delbert Francis Flagg, who had one sister, Patricia Selleck, who at the time lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. Flagg attended Corona High School in Corona, California, and while there he met Darlene Ellen Flagg, née Embraer, who went by Dory, and he ended up marrying her in 1961, with the two having been high school sweethearts. After high school, Flagg attended the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, graduating in June 1961. He then attended flight school in Pensacola, Florida, becoming a Navy pilot in 1962. Flagg was in active military duty between 1961 and 1967, including doing 3 tours as a fighter pilot during the Vietnam War. Continuing to fly for the US Navy, he logged 3,200 hours flying the Vought F.A. Crusader. While continuing on the Naval Reserve, he would embark on another career, ironically as a pilot for American Airlines, joining the company after he completed active duty in 1967 at the age of 29. As a Naval Reserve officer, he became a commanding officer of the Naval Reserve F-8 squadrons, VFP 206 and VFP 6366. He would also become Special Assistant to the Honourable Fred Davidson, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Reserve Affairs and Assistant Chief of Naval Operations for Air Warfare. He served as Assistant Chief of Staff Readiness and Training on the staff of Commander Naval Air Force's U.S. Atlantic Fleet and as Deputy for Reserve Affairs on the staff of Commander-in-Chief U.S. Atlantic Fleet. Flagg was awarded the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal, and the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat 5. In 1986, while continuing to fly for American Airlines, he became a Rear Admiral lower half. In 1987, he was posted to the Pentagon, ironically the building where American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into. In 1990, he was promoted to the role of Rear Admiral upper half. However, during his service as a Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy, one of the most controversial incidents in the history of the U.S. Navy took place, the Tullahooke scandal. While women had been allowed into the U.S. Navy since 1948 following the Women's Armed Services Integration Act being signed in by President Harry S. Truman in the 1990s, sexism was still rampant in the U.S. military against women. During the 35th Annual Tullahooke Association Symposium between the 5th of September and 8th of September 1991 in Las Vegas, officers of the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps aviation officers sexually assaulted 83 women and 7 men at the Las Vegas Hilton. This mainly took place in a third-floor hallway rented by the military with a gauntlet of male military officers in civilian clothes, either groping, molesting, or committing other sexual or physical assaults and harassment on women who worked for the U.S. Navy. The male military officers also engaged in public acts of nudity, public sex, and became excessively drunk. It wasn't until early October 1991 that the public became aware of a scandal, with the media dubbing it Tullahooke 91. The U.S. Navy investigated this following direction from the United States Congress. However, this was criticized because the investigation failed to outline exactly what happened. However, the aftermath by the public and the media resulted in sweeping changes regarding the attitudes and policies towards women in the military, where sexual harassment and assault was openly accepted, with a revised policy towards women in the military implemented in April 1993, with women able to compete for assignments in combat aircraft, additional ships available to women, as well as a draft proposal for Congress to remove barriers to assign women to combat vessels. As a result of the scandal, a secretarial letter of censure was issued by the Secretary of Defense Les Aspin to Flagg, following consultation with then-President Bill Clinton. This letter came to pass because it was believed that Flagg had not done enough to prevent the sexual harassment scene at the Las Vegas Hilton. He was one of 2 members of the U.S. Navy censored, and one was demoted, retired Vice Admiral Richard Dunleavy, who lost 2 stars. While retired at the time, as a result of his demotion, his pension was reduced by $100,000 per year. Able to remain with the Navy, he retired as a Rear Admiral upper half in 1995. However, the scandal and the censoring that manifested from it haunted Flagg for the remainder of his life, with the New York Times carrying the scandal in their first sentence, remembering him on the 15th of September 2001. He would continue to fly for American Airlines until 1998. However, despite being retired, he still held an office at the Pentagon, which he attended if he was contacted for technical advice. As a result of his military career and his career with American Airlines, he lived throughout the U.S., including in Mississippi, California, and Connecticut. In 1993, he moved to Millwood, Virginia, settling down in Daybreak Farm, where he owned a Black Angus beef cattle farm and was a cattle rancher. The The Flaggs also owned a home in Las Vegas, Nevada. He had 2 children, Mark, who lived in Boca Raton, Florida at the time of 9/11, and Michael, who lived in Clark County, Virginia at the time of 9/11, and went on to have 4 grandchildren, Elizabeth, Mitchell, Michael, and Natalie. He was a member of the Blue Ridge Hunt, along with his wife, as well as the Grace Evangelical Lutheran Church. He is buried at the United States Naval Academy Cemetery in Annapolis, Maryland. As he was one of only 5 people to surpass 3,000 hours of flying time in an F-8 Crusader, there is a plaque dedicated to him at the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, Florida. Richard Gabriel was seated in seat 3B in first class, the only passenger in that row. Gabriel was born on the 13th of December 1946 in the Bronx in Bronx County, New York. He graduated from Manhattan College. He served in the U.S. Army as a Marine lieutenant during the Vietnam War, gaining a Purple Heart after losing a leg during the Vietnam War and spending several days alone in the jungle. After the Vietnam War, he attended Columbia University, gaining a master's degree in business, and then worked for General Foods and other companies before setting up his own business, Stratton Consulting Co. At the time of 9/11, he lived in Great Falls, Virginia. He had 5 children. Gabriel was flying to Australia on business, and as discussed with the Falkenbergs, as American Airlines code-shared with Qantas, he was due to connect onto a Qantas flight in Los Angeles to Australia. Ian J. Gray was seated in seat 6F in the last row of first class, directly behind hijacker Salem Al-Azmir. Gray was born in Maidenall, Forest Heath District in Suffolk, England, on the 1st of September 1946. He was the son of Thomas Gray and Kathleen Gray, née Booth. He had one younger sister, Anne Policelli, née Gray, who lives in Cambridge. He spent much of his childhood in Scotland. Attending Cambridge University, he became a chartered accountant. In 1968, at the age of 22, he moved to the United States of America, where he remained for the rest of his life, working for Blue Cross Blue Shield BCBS in Chicago, Illinois. In the early 1970s, remaining with BCBS, he moved to Baltimore, Maryland. Gray then joined McBee Associates in Columbia, Maryland, growing to become principal. In 1979, he became a naturalized U.S. citizen. In 1990, he became a board of director at the Baltimore Medical System, where he was a treasurer, finance committee chair, and retirement committee member. Ultimately, he was described as living for Medicare regulations. In 1993, he would marry Anna Rayleigh and had one daughter, Lisa, from a separate relationship who lived in Timonium, Maryland. He had one stepson, Charles C. Rayleigh, who was a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy. He enjoyed volunteering with the Special Olympics and the Art Deco Society of Washington. He loved sci-fi, antique puzzles, dragons, cars, traveling, the theatre, and was a season ticket holder of the Georgetown Hoyas, the Baltimore Ravens, and the then Washington Redskins, which is now the Washington Commanders. At the time, he lived in Washington, D.C. Despite being born in the United Kingdom, as he was a U.S. citizen, Gray was not counted among the 67 Brits killed on 9/11. Speaking to the John O'Grant Journal on the 9th of September 2011, his sister would state, "He is always with us. We still miss him every day. The 10 years seem to have passed quite quickly, but on occasions it seems like a long time ago." She described her brother as a fun fellow and that his death was heartbreaking. He was also missed by his colleagues, with his former employer, McBee Associates, releasing a statement on the 9th of September 2016 with then CEO Mary Butcher, who worked alongside him for more than 9 years, stating, "Ian was a person who made you want to be the best you could be every day," with practice director Stephen Collier stating that he was truly missed. Stanley Hall was seated in seat 5A in first class. He was born on the 14th of April 1933 in Arlington, Arlington County, Virginia. He attended Washington Lee High School. In 1953, at the age of 20, he was drafted into the United States Army and served 2 years during the Korean War. He then graduated from George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and then attended Drexel University in Pennsylvania. In 1958, he married his wife, Judy. He joined the former Hughes Air Company, which would close in 1997, where he developed and built anti-radar technology. He was remembered by colleagues as the Dean of Electronic Warfare. In 1995, he went to work at the former US defense contractor Raytheon as Director of Program Management, which merged with United Technologies Corporation in April 2020 to become Raytheon Technologies, which is now RTX Corporation as of July 2023. As a result, he moved from Rancho Palos Verdes, California, where he previously resided, to Centreville, Virginia. He was on his way to Raytheon's office in Goleta, California. He had 3 children, Randy, Jane and Susan, and 5 grandchildren. Hall was an active member of South Bay Church of God for 11.5 years and was a Sunday school teacher and on the board of trustees. Dr. Brian Creed Jack was seated in seat 21F in economy class. Dr. Jack was born on the 3rd of January 1953 in Tyler, Smith County, Texas. He was the son of James Henry Jack and Helen Marie Jack Nee Myers. He had one brother, James Terry Jack, who at the time of 9/11 lived in Denver, Colorado. Graduating from Robert E. Lee High School in Tyler, Texas, he graduated as a National Merit Scholar and Presidential Scholar for the state of Texas in 1970. Attending the California Institute of Technology, a private university in Pasadena, California, he studied in Japan as a Henry Lucia Scholar, a cultural exchange program established by the Henry Lucia Foundation, established by Time Inc. founder Henry R. Lucia, with 18 Americans traveling to live and work in Asia for a year. Dr. Jack was one of the first participants to travel to Japan when the program was founded in 1974. Graduating with honours in 1974, he went on to undertake an MBA in 1978 at Leyland Stanford University, receiving a doctorate in economics from the University of Maryland in 1991. He worked for the Department of Defense, ironically in the Pentagon, for 23 years from 1978 as a budget analyst and director of Fiscal Economics Division. While there, he contributed to the analysis of US-Soviet positions in the SALT II and START negotiations. By 2001, he was the director of the Programming and Fiscal Economics Division in the Office of Program Analysis and Evolution in the Department of Defense. He was also responsible for the design and maintenance of a future year's defense program and development of the fiscal guidance. There, he was awarded the Defense Exceptional Service Medal for his work in 1998 and 2000. In 2000, he became an adjunct professor of economics at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., a private federally chartered research university in Washington, D.C., globally ranked as the 340th best university by the QS 2024 University World Rankings. In June 2001, he married his wife Barbara Jack Nee Rashko of New York. Dr. Jack was on his way to the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. It was calculated that American Airlines Flight 77 crashed 200 feet from his office at the Pentagon, and had he been at work at the Pentagon, as he would have any other Tuesday, he would have been safe. His wedding ring was recovered from the Pentagon. The Dr. Brian C. Jack Elementary School was named after him in Tyler, Texas. His parents would outlive him, with his father, James Henry Jack, passing away on the 14th of May 2006, and his mother, Helen Marie Jack, passing away on the 12th of July 2006. Seated in seat 2E in first class was Stephen Donald Jacoby, who went by Jack. Jacoby was born on the 11th of December 1957 in Harrisburg in Dauphin County in Pennsylvania. He graduated from Shippensburg University, earning a bachelor's degree in administration. He was one of the founding partners of First Page USA in 1988, becoming the Chief Operating Officer, Vice President and Corporate Secretary. In 1994, First Page USA would merge with Metrical, becoming Metrical Inc., a wireless data and messaging provider. There, he was the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President. He also served as Director of the Board of MNET, a startup wireless application service provider. Jacoby was also on the Board of Men Against Breast Cancer and the Camp Fantastic Special Love Charity Golf Tournament. He was an active member of the Good Shepherd Catholic Church, the George Washington University Athletics, and coached with the Little League system in Lawton, Virginia. At the time of 9/11, he lived in Alexandria, Virginia, and was married to Kim Jacoby and had 3 children, Nicholas, Jesse, and Jenna. Jacoby was on his way to a wireless communications conference in Los Angeles. His colleagues struggled without him, with the chairman and CEO of Metrical Inc., William L. Collins III, stating, "We felt shocked Tuesday, and right now, it's just starting to sink in. It's been hard on a lot of people." and Judge ni Campana was seated in seat 26F in the Boeing 757. Judge was born on the 28th of December 1951 in Manhattan, New York. She was the daughter of John Pilgrim Campana, who passed away on the 1st of November 1984, and Ruth Campana nee Emerson, and was one of 3 children. She was the youngest child and was seen as a daddy's girl, with a sister Ellen and a brother Michael. Growing up on Long Island, New York, she graduated from West Hempstead High School in 1969, attending Ohio Wesleyan University in Delaware. A lover for travel, her first travel job was with Sun Lines, a cruise line based in New York. In June 1978, she married her high school sweetheart, Jeffrey Judge, with the two of them moving to Washington, D.C. Shortly thereafter, she joined the travel department of the National Geographic Society. Eventually, she directed the travel office, leading photographers, videographers, and writers. National Geographic would state that everyone at National Geographic knew her. President and Chief Executive of National Geographic, John M. Fahey, Jr., stated, "Anne Judge is an extraordinary lady, well known and loved by almost everybody here at National Geographic." Indeed, she was also good at her job, with photographer for National Geographic James L. Stanfield stating that she created a year-long 20-page itinerary for him with flight, ground transport and hotel plans, and nothing went wrong. She was travelling with her colleague Joe Ferguson in seat 26D. She was travelling to a National Geographic Society conference on the Channel Islands located off Santa Barbara, California for an ecology conference as part of a photo cap sponsored by National Geographic. Her mother outlived her and died on the 8th of May 2003. Chandler Raymond Keller was seated in seat 18F in economy class. Keller went by Chad. He was born on the 8th of October 1971 in Redondo Beach in Los Angeles County, California. He was the son of Kathy Keller and Dick Keller and had 2 brothers, Brandon and Gavin. He grew up in Manhattan Beach, California, and spent part of his childhood in New York, Hong Kong and Sydney, Australia. This was because of his father's work with the Security Pacific Corporation. From a young age, he loved rockets and travel. Attending Bishop Montgomery High School in Torrance, California, Keller graduated in 1989 before attending the University of California, graduating in aerospace engineering in 1993. In 1996, he joined Hughes Boeing. By 9/11, he was a lead propulsion engineer and a project manager with the Boeing satellite systems. He was based in El Segundo, California, and involved in their satellite launch program. He loved surfing, skiing, snowboarding, traveling, outdoor activities, and cooking. He married Lisa Hurley Keller on the 22nd of July 2001 in Santa Barbara, California. He was flying back from Washington, D.C., having met with Defense Department officials at the Pentagon. His parents would tell NBC7 San Diego, the local NBC affiliate in San Diego, California, that he was traveling to secret work and to a briefing on launches. Keller was awarded the Medal of Freedom posthumously by the Department of Defense and the National Reconnaissance Office for his work with Boeing Satellite Systems and the National Reconnaissance Office on the 5th of November 2001. When Osama bin Laden was killed on the 2nd of May 2011, his brother Brandon Keller would tell KPBS, the PBS affiliate in San Diego, California, "Nothing can take away from what happened. It just makes it a little easier and a little less painful, and it hurts a little less." On the 11th of September 2021, astronaut Chris Cassidy took a photograph of Keller and his wife 227 nautical miles above the planet on board the International Space Center, with the commemoration from his funeral also held above the planet. The University of Colorado Boulder set up a scholarship in honor of Keller, with between 1 and 3 scholarships provided per year to the University of Colorado Boulder aerospace engineering students. Seated in seat 21C in economy class was Yvonne Esley Kennedy nee O'Prey. Kennedy was born on the 29th of June 1939 in Punchbowl, New South Wales, Australia. She was the daughter of Jack O'Prey and Mona O'Prey. She had one older brother, Barry, who was born in 1946. She attended Glenfield Primary School and Liverpool Girls High School, completing her senior certificate, the precursor to the higher school certificate in New South Wales. After high school, she worked as a secretary and bookkeeper in Sydney for ES&A Bank, the English, Scottish and Australia Bank, which merged on the 1st of October 1970 to create the ANZ, Australia and New Zealand Bank. She then worked for the South Sydney Council and the Sydney Council. However, she loved to travel and briefly lived in New Zealand. Returning to Sydney, she met Barry Lee Thomas Kennedy, who would become the love of her life. On the 16th of January 1972, both would marry. In 1973, their son Lee James Charles Kennedy was born, and in 1974, Simon Paul Kennedy was born. The four grew up in a home, but they built themselves in Toongabbie. Both started a business and travelled the world. In 1976, she joined the Australian Red Cross as a volunteer and first aid instructor, reaching the rank of commandant. Her husband passed away on the 10th of May 1985 in Toongabbie, New South Wales, Australia, and was buried at Pine Grove Memorial Park in Minchinbury. This left her to raise her children and care for her parents, who had moved to Toongabbie to assist the now single mother, and she also looked after the business. She then cared for her parents before they died. In 1990, she joined the Australian Red Cross full-time, developing the Voluntary Aid Detachment and training and coordinator first aid volunteers. The principles of the Australian Red Cross were passed on to her kids, with her son Simon telling ABC Australia's Radio National Drive program in 2021, "When we were young boys and teenagers, she was always espousing the values of the Red Cross, the humanity and the neutrality, and she would talk about it constantly. We'd be lectured on the Geneva Convention as 15-year-olds. She worked for the Australian Red Cross for a decade, retiring on the 15th of December 2000 before becoming a volunteer with the Australian Red Cross. In March 2001, she attended the wedding of her eldest son, Lee James Charles Kennedy, who married Tracy Kathleen in New Zealand. In May 2001, she was awarded the Australian Red Cross Distinguished Service Medal. In July 2001, she was elected to the role of the Executive Officer of the Corps at the Australian Red Cross, but this would never come to pass, as her appointment was to take place after 9/11. This was because she was taking the trip of a lifetime to the United States of America and Canada. She travelled to parts of the United States of America and Canada that she had never been to, including the Rockies and Alaska. On the 4th of August, she departed from Sydney Kingston Smith Airport for the United States of America and never returned. She was flying from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, California, connecting to Honolulu, Hawaii, where she would stay from the 11th of September until the 15th of September, before returning to Sydney. At the time of 9/11, flights from Honolulu to Sydney were operated in a duopoly by Qantas and Air Canada, which flew from Sydney to Vancouver, Canada via Honolulu, aboard the Boeing 767. To this day, as founding members of a One World Alliance, Qantas and American Airlines have excellent relations, and she was going to connect on the 15th of September 2001 onto a Qantas flight back to her native Sydney. Her son Simon told Woman's Day magazine in 2021, during the hijacking, she would have been holding someone's hand or doing something to help on the plane as it went down. To this day, American Airlines does not fly direct from Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, with only United Airlines flying direct from Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, albeit they did not start this route until 2011, necessitating changes at the time of 9/11 on the West Coast. Her remains were found and she was buried next to her husband at Pine Grove Memorial Park in Minchinbury, New South Wales. More than 1,000 people attended her memorial service that took place at St Mary's Cathedral in the Sydney CBD on the 19th of September 2001. Numerous personal objects were recovered and are exhibited at the National Museum of Australia in Canberra. This includes her Australian Red Cross Distinguished Service Medal, a condolence card sent to her sons and signed by then President George H.W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush, as well as her leather wallet and keys. She was one of 11 Australians killed on 9/11. Her son Simon wrote the book 9/11 and the Art of Happiness, an Australian story telling the story of his mum. Norma Carney Cruz was seated in seat 21A in economy class. She was born on the 23rd of April 1956 in Queens, New York. She had one child, Imran A. Khan, born in 1988, who was 13 when her mother passed away. At the time of 9/11, she lived in Reston, Virginia, and was manager of member services with Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors National Association. Karen Ann Kincaid was seated in seat 15D in economy class. Kincaid was born on the 3rd of November 1960 in Waverly in Bremer County in Iowa. She was the daughter of Grant William Kincaid, who passed away on the 17th of October 1998, and Arlene Amanda Kincaid Nee-Platy, who passed away on the 25th of January 1988. She had two brothers, Cassie Kincaid and Reverend Christian Kincaid, and two sisters, Kay D'Amico and Kay Kincaid Knoll. She attended Central College in Pella, Iowa, where she got a Bachelor of Arts before attending Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. From 1986 to 1987, she was a law clerk to Leo Oxenberger, Chief Judge of the Iowa County of Appeals, before becoming law clerk to Jesse Smith Hensley from 1987 to 1989. From 1989 to 1993, she was a senior attorney advisor for the Private Radio Bureau at the Federal Communications Commission. From 1993 until 2001, she was a partner in the communications practice of a law firm Wiley Rain and Feidling. She also served as an adjunct professor at the Columbus School of Law at the Catholic University of America, based in Washington, D.C., a private Catholic research university and the only higher education institution founded by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. The Catholic University of America is ranked as the 1024th best university in the world by the U.S. News & World Report 2024. She was married to Peter Batakin and lived in Washington, D.C. Dong-Chul Lee was seated in seat 13F in economy class. Lee was born on the 30th of March 1953 in Daegu, South Korea. In 1968, at the age of 15, he moved to the United States of America. He would eventually become a US citizen and thereby was not counted among the 28 South Koreans killed on 9/11. While in the United States of America, he adopted the nickname DC. He graduated from the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins University in computer science. He then went on to work for the US Air Force for 4 years and the National Security Agency for 14 years. By 9/11, he was working as a program manager in government information and communications systems in the Space and Communications Group for the Boeing company. He was married to Jung-mi and had 3 children, Daniel, Melissa, and Cynthia. He was also strongly religious. At the time of 9/11, he lived in Loudoun County, Virginia, and was on his way to California on a business trip. In 2005, the Newton Lee Elementary School in Ashburn, Loudoun County, was opened. It was named after him and fellow Loudoun County resident Christopher Newton, who was also on board American Airlines Flight 77, who we will come back to in a minute. There was a picture of both as you enter the school. Dora Marie Menchaca was seated in seat 24F in economy class. She was born in San Antonio, Texas on the 6th of June 1956. She was married to Earl Dorsey and had 2 children, Imani, aged 18 at the time of 9/11, and a 4-year-old child. She met Dorsey in 1981 while both were in graduate school at UCLA. Since 1991, she had worked at Amgen's Thousand Oaks headquarters in California, residing in Santa Monica, California. Amgen is a multinational biopharmaceutical company. By 9/11, she was Associate Director of Clinical Research. On the 9th of September 2001, she traveled to Washington, D.C. for meetings for 2 days with regulators of the Food and Drug Administration to discuss development of a new prostate cancer drug. The meetings were to last until the 11th of September, but ended a day early. In order to get back to her husband and 4-year-old son, she changed her flight to travel on board American Airlines Flight 77. She was remembered by colleagues at Amgen shortly before the 20th anniversary of 9/11 on the 10th of September 2021. Her remains were found and she is buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in Santa Monica, California. There was also a reflection garden and marker at Amgen's headquarters which states Dora Menchaca, scientist, mother, wife, colleague, friend, much admired, greatly missed. Christopher Cargill Newton was seated in seat 6E in first class in the last row, directly behind hijacker Nawaf al-Hazmir. Newton was born on the 23rd of September 1962 in Long Beach, Los Angeles County, California. He was the son of Michael and Barbara Newton and had 1 sister, Anne Elizabeth, and 1 son, Stephen. Newton grew up in Anaheim, California. At the age of 14, he became an Eagle Scout. Graduating from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo with high marks, he would go on to earn his CPA. He then gained his MBA from the University of California, Los Angeles Anderson School. He was the CEO of Work-Life Benefits. He moved to Ashburn, Virginia with his family. He was relocating Work-Life Benefits to Virginia to be closer to key customers and the Paris-based corporate partner Accor. He was married to Amy Newton and had 2 children, Michael and Sarah. Newton loved travelling, performing, arts, music, playing golf and home improvements. Seated in seat 3E in first class was Barbara Olson, and debatably the most famous passenger aboard American Airlines Flight 77. Barbara K. Olson nee Bracher was born in Houston, Texas on the 27th of December 1955, one of 2 children with an older sister, Toni Bracher Lawrence. She was the daughter of Victor Charles Bracher and Louise Bracher nee Paxton. She graduated from Waltrip High School in Houston. She attended the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas, where she gained her Bachelor of Arts before gaining a Juris Doctor at Yeshiva University, a private Orthodox Jewish university in New York. She would eventually reside in Washington, D.C. She would serve as an Assistant United States General, a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and as Chief Investigative Counsel for the United States House of Representatives between 1995 and 1996, working to investigate 2 scandals that arose during the administration of President Bill Clinton, including the White House Travel Office firings. The White House Travel Office controversy, which became known as Travelgate, saw 7 employees of the White House Travel Office fired in 1993, which became controversial because executive branch employees typically remain in post for several years. Critics contended that the firings occurred to allow friends and campaign donors of the Clinton administration to take over travel duties at the White House. The White House contended that the firings were done because of financial improprieties. The investigation by the FBI and Department of Justice took place between 1993 and 2000 and resulted in the fired White House Travel Office Director Billy Dale being charged with embezzlement but found not guilty in 1995, and the exoneration of President Clinton by independent counsel Kenneth Starr in 1998. President Clinton would later describe the allegations and investigation as a fraud. Since 1998, Olson had been a conservative commentator and member of the Republican Party. She was a commentator on numerous outlets, including Fox News, NBC, including on Meet the Press, and CNN, including being a frequent guest on Larry King Live, as well as To the Contrary, a half-hour all-women news analysis program in 2000, which aired on PBS. She was also a regular guest on Politically Incorrect. Hosted by comedian Bill Maher, Politically Incorrect aired on Comedy Central from the 25th of July 1993 before moving to ABC on the 5th of July 2002 as a nightly late-night TV show following the news program Nightline. The show was filmed at CBS Television City in Los Angeles, California. In 1996, she married Theodore Olson, the 42nd Solicitor General of the United States of America, from the 11th of June 2001 until the 10th of July 2004. Olson was born on the 11th of September 1940. As the 90s wore on, Olson became a frequent critic of the Bill Clinton administration and wrote the book about then First Lady Hillary Clinton, Hell to Pay, the unfolding story of Hillary Rodham Clinton, which was published in 1999 by Regnery Publishers. She would then join the law firm Bulk and Bingham. The last time she was on TV was on C-SPAN on the 9th of September 2001.
Obviously do political advising and the thing. I guess they decide I was more in with the political insider. The interesting thing about that is we had a lunch this week of all the women, the 100 women who were named, and Donna Brazile and I talked a little bit, and they asked all the women to fill out when they thought the first women president would run and who it would be.
Olson was on her way to a taping of Politically Incorrect in Los Angeles. Her original plan was to fly on the 10th of September 2001, however she wanted to wait until the 11th of September to wish her husband a happy birthday on the morning that she left. While on board in the galley and in coach, Olson called her husband twice. In the first call, she told Theodore Olson, "Our plane is hijacked," and told her husband how passengers had been forced into the economy class section and that the hijackers had box cutters and knives. Her husband informed her that American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175 had already hit the north and south tower of the World Trade Center. However, most significantly, she would ask her husband what she should tell the captain to do, leading to the belief that Captain Burlingame, the third, and First Officer Charlebois had been forced by the hijackers into the economy class section of the Boeing 757, making them the only pilots on 9/11 not to be killed instantly by the hijackers. Her husband would later tell Fox 5, the Fox affiliate of Washington, D.C., on the 11th of September 2021, "To this day, I don't know how in the world she managed to do it," referring to the phone calls that she made to him. Her call prompted Ted Olson to warn others at the FBI and the Justice Department, where he worked at the time, that a third plane had been hijacked. Thereby it was Olson's call to her husband that let the world know that American Airlines Flight 77 was hijacked.
Yes, I was relieved that she was on a plane and she was speaking to me. Then she told me that her plane had been hijacked. We spoke for a minute or two before our communications were cut. She called again a few moments later. She wanted to know what she could do, what she could tell the pilot. I asked her where she was in the airplane. She had started off in the first class section. She told me that she and the passengers had been herded to the back of the airplane, that the hijackers had taken over the plane with knives and box cutters.
In the days after 9/11, Bill Maher would leave an empty chair on the set of Politically Incorrect in honour of Olson. Her second book, The Final Days, The Last Desperate Abuses of Power by the Clinton White House, was posthumously published in October 2001 by Heidenberger Publishers. 3 months after 9/11, her remains were identified and were buried at Ellison Cemetery in Wisconsin. In 2006, her husband would remarry, marrying Lady Booth, his fourth wife. Seated in seat 13A, directly behind hijacker Mached Moched, was Ruben S. Onedo. Onedo was born in the Philippines on the 15th of October 1961. Moving to the United States of America at an early age, he attended Hobart Elementary School and Benedo Junior High School, as well as Fairfax High School in Los Angeles, California. He would earn a computer engineering degree from the University of California, Los Angeles in December 1984. After college, he began working at Boeing Satellite Systems in El Segundo, California. He became known as Tornado, the Tornado, for his hard work, diligence, and quick action, becoming a lead propulsion engineer in the Satellite Systems Engineering Organization. In June 2001, at St. Brendan's Catholic Church, he married what was described as the love of his life, Sheila, who was at the time pregnant with a baby girl born on the 31st of January 2002 named Robin. He had been on a business trip in Washington, D.C. and was returning to Los Angeles. Robin was interviewed by Tuesday's Children on the 7th of September 2021 in an article interviewing children who hadn't met their fathers who were killed on 9/11. As he was an American citizen at the time of his passing, despite being of Filipino descent, Onedo was not counted amongst the 16 Filipinos killed on 9/11. Seated in seat 14C, and the only passenger in row 14, was Robert Bruce Penninger. Penninger was born on the 23rd of October 1937 in Oak Park in Cook County, Illinois. At the time of 9/11, he lived in Poway, California. He was married and enjoyed attending car shows, motorcycle trips, and had a 1999 Cobra Mustang, which he won at a car show. He worked for BAE Systems as an electrical engineer. Robert Reese Ploger III was seated in seat 2B in first class, directly behind hijacker Honey Hunjaw. Ploger was born on the 19th of December 1941 in Joint Base Lewis McChord in Pierce County in Washington State. He was the son of Major General Robert Reese Ploger II and Marguerite Ploger née Feierach. His mother would pass away on the 25th of February 1982. He was one of 6 children with 2 brothers, Wayne Plodger, who lived in Montrose, Virginia at the time of 9/11, Daniel Plodger, who lived in Sarasota, Florida, Gregory Plodger, who lived in Bologna, Italy, as well as Marine Hill nee Plodger, who lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and Marguerite Plodger, who lived in Spokane, Washington State. Due to his father's military career, he grew up across the United States of America and the world. Graduating from the Paris American High School in Paris, France in 1959, Plodger served in the U.S. Army from 1960 to 1962. He then attended Michigan State University before attending the University of Denver in 1965, from which he graduated. On the 7th of March 1964, he would marry his first wife, Sheila Lynn Plodger nee Wagner. They would go on to have 2 children, Wendy Plodger and Robert Rhys Plodger IV. Plodger III would foster a long career in IT and was jokingly referred to as being a midwife at the birth of the internet, including developing one of ARPANET's first nodes at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He then went on to work as a development engineer at a startup company and developed IBM attachments for compatible networks for the Series I 370 and Series I X.25. He retired from IBM in 1996 with 2 patents. He then went on to become Director of Enterprise Engineering for the U.S. Customs and Modernization Program at Lockheed Martin. At the time of 9/11, he was living in Annandale, Virginia. His first wife divorced him, but she kept his name. He would then go on to marry Zandra Cooper, who would become Zandra Plodger, and both were on board American Airlines Flight 77, travelling on their honeymoon to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and we will come back to her in a moment. As we mentioned, until this day, only United Airlines flies directly from Washington, D.C. to Honolulu, starting the route in 2011, which necessitated a transfer in other parts of the United States of America. Plodger loved woodwork, DIY projects, playing tennis, grilling and stir-fry. His father passed away on the 7th of September 2002 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sheila Lynn Plodger passed away on the 30th of October 2017 in her native Ohio at the age of 76. Zandra Mari-Raee Plodger nee Cooper was seated next to her husband in seat 2A in first class, travelling with her husband Robert Plodger III on their honeymoon to Hawaii. She was born on the 14th of November 1952 in San Antonio, Texas. She was previously married and had 2 daughters, Erin Cooper and Zenda Tedesco. She was known to her best friends as Z. Zena, her second daughter, had a heart condition, leading to Cooper becoming an avid supporter of the American Heart Association. She had worked for IBM for 20 years. Seated in 13D in economy class was Lisa J. Raines. Raines was born in Queens, New York on the 30th of December 1958. She was the daughter of Arthur Raines and Marilyn Raines, with one brother, Douglas Raines. She had a husband, Stephen Push, head of investor media relations for IGEN International. At the time, she lived in Great Falls, Virginia. Raines was a senior vice president of government relations at Genzyme Corporation, a biotechnology company based in Boston, Massachusetts. She was respected at Capitol Hill for her knowledge of healthcare issues and was a key figure in negotiating legislative compromises in several drug and healthcare disputes, including the 1997 Food and Drug Administration Modernization Act, which regulated the new drug manufacturing changes. She also championed the fast-tracking of legislation that permitted the Food and Drug Administration to grant speedier access to some new drugs. Throughout 2001, she had worked to get the biotechnology industry to support the idea of Medicare drug coverage for the elderly. Raines was on her way to Los Angeles to meet company sales representatives handling Renale, a drug for patients with kidney dialysis. Push would make a statement to the National Commission on Terrorist Attacks upon the United States on the 31st of March 2003 during the first public hearing, noting that after her death he was thrown into a state of shock, disbelief and grief, but his strongest emotion was anger. When the September 11 Commission report was released on the 22nd of July 2004, he would tell CBS News, discussing the recommendations of a report, "It's going to be a very difficult struggle. These forces will try to prevent these changes from taking place." Todd Hayes Rubin was seated in seat 13C in economy class. He was born in Washington, D.C. on the 30th of June 1961. but at the time lived in Potomac, Maryland, where he grew up. He was the son of S. Jesse Rubin and Carol Rubin. He had one brother, Keith Rubin, and a sister, Stacy Messer. He graduated from Churchill High School in Potomac, Maryland. Initially, Rubin was a certified public accountant at Resnick, Federer and Silverman. He continued to work there until 1993. In 1989, he graduated from the George Washington University's National Law Center with honors. In the same year, he joined the law firm Tucker Flyer, which would merge with Venable in 2000, where Rubin was working at the time of 9/11. He was married to Vivian, having married her in 1987, and had two sons, Jason and Jeffrey, both born in 1990, and had one golden retriever, Dudley. Rubin loved coaching both of his children in basketball and soccer. Having played high school and college soccer, he loved all Washington sports teams, including the ice hockey team, the Washington Capitals, the soccer team, DC United, the college football team of the University of Maryland, the Maryland Terrapins, and the NFL team, the Washington Redskins, which is now the Washington Commanders. He was on board American Airlines Flight 77 for a business trip. His parents would become volunteers at the Pentagon Memorial. Following the death of Osama bin Laden on the 3rd of May 2011, Jesse Rubin would tell NBC4 News, the local NBC News affiliate of Washington, D.C., "I was happy the crowds were happy and jumping up and down around their country. But at the same time, it's bittersweet for us." Carol Rubin would state regarding their son, "He's in our thoughts and our hearts all the time." Both would note that while they were happy that Osama bin Laden had been killed, they would note that it was no closure for them, with Jesse stating, "We don't have closure as long as our son is not here." John Paul Sammartino was seated in row 22C in economy class. Sammartino was born on the 8th of November 1963 in Queens, New York, but lived in Annandale, Virginia, having moved there in 1996. He was the son of Anne Sammartino and John Sammartino. He moved to Washington, D.C. in the 1980s to study at George Washington University before getting a master's degree at Johns Hopkins University. He became an engineer at the Naval Research Lab before joining Exxon Tech in 1990. Marrying Deborah Rooney in 1997, he had one daughter, Nicole Sammartino. Seated in seat 18A in economy class was Diane Marie Simmons, née Helm, who was travelling with her husband, George Simmons, who she had been married to since 1982. We will come back to George Simmons in a minute. She met her husband George Simmons while working at Xerox, where she worked until 1994, when she retired to take care of her dad. She was the daughter of William John Helm, who went by Bill, and Beatrice Veronica Helm née Wiener. Her father died on the 11th of May 2001, while her mother passed away on the 19th of February 1980. Both were on their way to scatter some of her father's ashes over Kauai in Hawaii, with another portion buried with his wife at Kauai Veterans Cemetery. His love for Kauai manifested from his stationing there during the Second World War, and he lived there for 12 years before moving to the continental United States of America in 1994 to be closer to his family, residing in a Sterling nursing home, with Diane Marie Simmons retiring from Xerox to take care of her father. Diane had volunteered to go ahead of the rest of the family, who were also headed to Kauai. To this day, no airline flies from the east coast of the United States of America to Laue Airport, which serves Kauai, necessitating changing on the west coast. At the time of 9/11, she lived in Great Falls, Virginia. She had 3 children: George Simons Jr., who lived in Huntington Beach, California; Diane Simmons, who lived in Massapequa, Long Island, New York; and Brian Long of Sterling, Virginia, as well as 4 grandchildren: Ryan, Aaron, C.J. Long, and Samantha Duncan. She loved to travel, visit friends and family. George Simons was born on the 16th of July 1944 in Queens, New York. For 32 years he worked for Xerox as a manager of sales training, spending his last years of his career with Xerox in Leesburg, Virginia. He loved golf, took pride in making martinis, was a member of the No Bats Baseball Club, a club of people who have a real passion for baseball, and also loved travelling as well as spending time with his family and friends. He would marry Diane Marie Simmons, née Helm, in 1982, who he was seated next to in seat 18C in economy class. George had 3 children: George Simons Jr., who lived in Huntington Beach, California; Diane Simmons, who lived in Massapequa, Long Island, New York; and Brian Long of Sterling, Virginia, as well as 4 grandchildren, Ryan, Eric, CJ Long, and Samantha Duncan. He retired shortly before 9/11 from Xerox. Diane's father, William John Helm, died on the 11th of May 2001. Both were on their way to scatter some of her father's ashes over Kauai in Hawaii, with another portion buried with his wife at Kauai Veterans Cemetery. Seated in seat 20D in economy class was Mari-Raee Soper. Soper was born on the 19th of June 1966 in Inverness, Illinois. Her parents were Marion and Bill Soper. She was one of 3 children with 2 sisters. She attended William Fremd High School in Palatinate, where she became a standout gymnast. Soper enrolled at the Iowa State University and joined the women's gymnasts team in her first year. For her final 3 years at Iowa State University, she became the most valuable gymnast as a senior and was placed on a scholarship for her last 3 years. In 1988, she graduated from Iowa State University with a bachelor's degree in exercise science. Soper then went on to attend the University of North Texas, where she graduated with a master's degree in athletic administration in 1993. She would then go on and study at the University of Denver College of Law, graduating with a Juris Doctor in 1996. In the same year, she would move to Washington, D.C. to work for the Judge Advocate General's Corps in the United States Navy as part of JAG, serving as a lieutenant. In the same year, she would move to Washington, D.C. to work for the Judge Advocate General's Corps in the United States Navy as part of JAG, serving as a lieutenant. There she defended sailors in their appeals of criminal cases. However, her love for gymnastics never really left her, and she served on the coaching staffs of the United States Naval Academy Women's Gymnastics Club team and at George Washington University. In 2000, she joined Schmelzer, Apteker and Shepard, working as a lawyer. At the time, she was earning $98,000. At the time, according to the census results, the average wage in the United States of America was $42,228. However, on the other side of the country, the University of California, Santa Barbara had reinstated their women's gymnastics team on the 13th of August 2001, having suspended the team on the 10th of August 2001. They needed a new coach and offered the role to Soper. However, the University of California, Santa Barbara noted that they could only guarantee the women's gymnastics team would continue for 1 year until 2002, until it would be suspended, and Soper would take a significant pay cut from her role as a lawyer at Schmelter, Apteker and Shepard, earning just $28,000. However, she agreed to take it, and on 9/11 she was flying aboard American Airlines Flight 77 to start a new life in Korea. Her mother would tell ABC7, the local ABC affiliate in Chicago, that her love was always gymnastics. It was her dream job. She always wanted to be a women's head gymnastics, collegiate gymnastics coach. Managing director of Schmelzer, Apteker and Shepard would tell the Los Angeles Times she decided she wasn't happy being a lawyer and decided to do something she was happy with, and we supported her. Her last email to her friends and family stated, "New job, new city, new state, new life." Her mother, Marion, would convince her daughter to take American Airlines Flight 77, believing that it was safer to fly cross-country than drive. On 9/11, she was dropped off at Washington Dulles International Airport by former JAG colleague Jim Bailey, who said that she was so excited about going to California and starting a new job. She was also travelling with her cat on board American Airlines Flight 77. On the 12th of September 2001, the then Chancellor of the University of California, Santa Barbara, Henry Young, would state, "We are extremely saddened by the loss of a dedicated educator and coach, and our hearts go out to her relatives and loved ones," with Athletic Director Gary Cunningham stating, "We are shocked and dismayed by what has happened. Our deepest sympathies go out to her family. Mari-Raee was a very dynamic and enthusiastic person, and it is tragic that her life was cut short. We are all extremely saddened by her loss, and its significance cannot be expressed in words." Counselling was offered to students and staff at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Her remains were found and she was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. A Judge Advocate General Corps conference room in the Pentagon was named after her. Iowa State University continues to present the Mari-Raee Soper Outstanding Performance Award to a gymnastics athlete after each home meet. In 2002, the University of California, Santa Barbara dedicated that year's gymnastics session in honor of Sopa, flying her mother and stepfather to California from her native Illinois for a match. The Mari-Raee Sopa Gymnastics Memorial Fund was created by her mother, which the Daily Herald newspaper described as a mission of love in an attempt to save the University of California, Santa Barbara's gymnastics program, but only raised $75,000, and the university insisted that they would need $4 million, leading the university to cut the program. The $75,000 raised by the Mari-Raee Sopa Gymnastics Memorial Fund went on to help other gymnastics programs. By the 9th of October 2005, the fund had equated to $91,626. On the second anniversary of 9/11, on the 11th of September 2003, a memorial plaque was added in her honor at the Memorial Union at Iowa State University. The book, Within Her Grasp, was written by Joanne Simon Taliele and published on the 3rd of June 2015. Robert Spiesman, who went by Bob, was seated in seat 4B in first class. Born in Queens on the 9th of August 1953, he was the son of Jack Spiesman and Joyce Spiesman. He graduated from the State University of New York at New Paltz. In 1984, he would join worldwide diamond manufacturer Lazare Kaplan International, which was based in New York. He was also chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the American Gem Society. By 2001, he was living in Irvington, New York, and was executive vice president at Lazare Kaplan International. He was married to Rena, the daughter of Lazare Kaplan International's chairperson, Maurice Templesman. He had 3 daughters, Tara, Brittany, and Haley. Spiesman was on board American Airlines Flight 77 on a business trip from Washington, D.C. on his way to Los Angeles. On the 5th of October 2016, the Bobby Spiesman basketball court in Irvington was named in memory of him due to his love for basketball. As his remains were never found, a rock at the court was laid in his honor. Seated in seat 19D in economy class was Norma Lang Stoyerlech, the only passenger in row 19. She was born on the 1st of May 1947 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She initially attended the University of Dayton before being transferred to Carnegie Mellon University, where she was valedictorian, before attending Temple University, where she got a master's in psychology, before attending the University of Wisconsin, where she got a PhD, allowing her to become a psychologist. Becoming a clinical psychologist, she would move to Alexandria, Virginia, working at the Children's Hospital before practicing in Old Town Alexandria. She then opened her office in Annandale, Virginia. While at the University of Dayton, she met Eugene Sterle, who would serve in the US military for 2 years during the Vietnam War. After his military service, both would get married. Her husband initially worked for the US government in public service before becoming a senior fellow at the Urban Institute. Sterle would become involved in the Blessed Sacred Catholic Church and developed a love for travel. She had 2 daughters, Christian, born in 1973, and Lynn, born in 1977. By 2001, Christian was a Navy doctor in Okinawa, Japan, while Lynn was an actuarial consultant. Her husband had flown to Singapore to teach a seminar. With her daughter based in Okinawa, Japan, Sterle flew to Los Angeles to connect onto an American Airlines flight to Japan for a family reunion before going on a holiday to Thailand. Unlike today, with Tokyo Haneda served directly from Washington, D.C. Dulles International Airport by All Nippon Airways and United Airlines, in 2001 there were no direct services from Washington, D.C. to Tokyo and indeed Japan, necessitating a transferring on the West Coast. American Airlines continues to fly to Tokyo Haneda from Los Angeles, as well as Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas and New York JFK, as well as Tokyo Narita from Dallas-Fort Worth. A book belonging to her, Meditation on Silence by Sister Wendy Beckett, is on display at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. In 2012, the Sterle family was inducted into the Living Legends of Alexandria. Seated in seat 20F in economy class was Hilda Elizabeth Taylor. Taylor was born on the 31st of March 1943 in Sierra Leone. She had a brother named Bowie. A divorcee, she had 3 children. The eldest, Octavia, was born in 1961, who still lived in Sierra Leone. Donald Stafford, born in 1964, and Dennis Stafford, born in 1966. She lived with her 2 sons at the time of 9/11 in Forestville, Virginia. Taylor got a master's degree from the University of the District of Columbia. She became an elementary school teacher, teaching the 6th grade, and loved her job, planning projects to capture her students' attention, becoming a veteran teacher at M.V. Leckie Elementary School in Southwest Washington, D.C. As a teacher, she exposed her urban elementary school students to a world beyond Washington, D.C., and was an avid participant in working with other schools to promote geography. Assistant Principal Denise Simmons would note, she was very enthusiastic, very dedicated. She was always seeking new and creative experiences for her students. Parents looked forward to having their children in her room. As a teacher, she was traveling with a group of elementary school children to the Channel Islands located off Santa Barbara, California, for an ecology conference as part of a photo camp sponsored by National Geographic as part of a 4-day trip. She loved spending time with her 8-year-old grandson, Reinhard, as well as her other 4 grandchildren in Sierra Leone, travelling and cooking, especially dishes from Sierra Leone, as well as gardening. Her sons, Donald and Dennis, noted that she savoured life. Upon finding out of Taylor's passing, her friend Linda Onwuka stated, "I'm angry, but it's in God's control. He's the one we all answer to." Despite being born in Sierra Leone, Taylor was counted as a citizen of the United States of America, having gained American citizenship. Indeed, officially no citizens of Sierra Leone died on 9/11. Leonard Taylor, unrelated to Hilda, whom we discussed earlier, was seated in seat 24C in economy class. Taylor was born on the 20th of August 1957 in Pasadena in Los Angeles County in California. He was the son of Mary and Raymond and had 2 sisters, Anna and Barbara, and 2 brothers, Gregory and Jeffrey. Shortly thereafter, his family moved to Massachusetts. There he attended Andover High School, graduating in 1964, captaining the hockey team in his senior year. He then attended Worcester Polytechnic Institute, graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Physics with honours in 1979. After graduation, he took on a position as an analyst with Xon Tech Inc., moving to Van Nuys in California. While there, he continued his love for hockey, playing both amateur and semi-professional, as well as coaching youth hockey. While there, he met his future wife, Karen Orman, who he would marry in 1988. In 1989, he transferred to Zontech's Washington, D.C. office. By 9/11, he was working as the technical group manager. He would go on to have 2 daughters, Jessica and Colette. At the time, he lived in Reston, Virginia. Taylor loved cycling, often riding the 20 miles to Zontech's Washington, D.C. office, as well as participated in numerous bike rides and tours for local charities. Seated in seat 12F in economy class was Sandra Dawn Teague, with seats 12A and 12B occupied by hijackers Mashed Mokhed and Khalid Almindar. She was the only passenger in row 12 who wasn't a hijacker. Teague was born in Hickory in Catawba County in North Carolina on the 19th of June 1970. She was the daughter of Elaine and James Teague and had 2 siblings, Jennifer and Chris Teague. She was described as warm, witty, vivacious, and an athletic woman. She previously lived in Des Moines, Iowa, getting a master's degree in physical therapy from the University of Osteopathic Medicine and Health Sciences in 1998. In 2000, Teague moved to Washington, D.C., working as a physical therapist at Georgetown University. The director of physical medicine, Meris Chang, stated that she was an excellent clinician and a rising star, and losing her was a tremendous loss. She lived in Fairfax, Virginia, with her boyfriend Frank Huffman, a naval reservist on active duty. Huffman drove his girlfriend to Washington Dulles International Airport. Teague was on her way to Australia for a 3-week trip, her first abroad. As we previously mentioned, to this day there are no direct flights from Washington DC to Australia, necessitating her changing onto a Qantas flight from Los Angeles, with flights from the United States of America to Australia operating in a duopoly between Qantas and United Airlines, with Qantas and American Airlines to this day maintaining a strong relationship as founding members of a One World Alliance. Her boyfriend was heading for the naval building overlooking the Pentagon when the Boeing 757 crashed into the Pentagon. Leslie Ann Falkenberg nee Whittington was seated in seat 23D in economy class and was travelling, and indeed would appear on the passenger manifesto under her maiden name. Whittington was born in Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas, on the 3rd of November 1955. She was the daughter of Horace Greeley Whittington and Ruth Koch nee Simpson. She had two brothers, Howard Gregory Whittington, who went by Greg, born in 1953, who died in 1991, Kirk Whittington, and another sister, Sarah Guest nee Whittington. Both Kirk and Sarah were alive at the time of 9/11, as were her parents. She earned a PhD in economics from the University of Colorado in 1984. In the same year, she married her husband, Charles Stevens Falkenberg. They would go on to have two children, Zoe Elizabeth Falkenberg, born on the 8th of November 1992, and Dana Christine Falkenberg, born on the 21st of July 1998, the youngest passenger aboard American Airlines Flight 77. She would go on to become an assistant professor at the University of Maryland College Park, before becoming an associate professor and an associate dean at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. She was known for her excellent teaching and organizational skills, wit, and her research on economic issues affecting families and children. This included how the tax code affected women and families, and included work on paid parental leave, which Professor Bill Gromley, a friend and colleague of hers, said was ahead of her time. She also volunteered for the PTA and neighbourhood babysitting co-op and other volunteer endeavours. At the time, the family lived in Chevy Chase, Maryland. She was to work as a visiting scholar for a 2-month fellowship at the Australian National University, ANU, in Canberra, Australia's capital. She was to be part of a newly created Centre for Tax Systems. Falkenberg had taken leave from work for 2 months to turn this into a family adventure. ABC News Australia in 2021 would describe this as the opportunity of a lifetime. In a card to one of her sisters before 9/11, she wrote, "We're busy preparing for a move and our trip to Australia. Traditionally, ANU was always the number 1 university in Australia. However, today it is ranked as the 4th best university in Australia and the 34th best university globally in the world by the QS 2024 University World Rankings. To this day, Canberra does not have any direct flights to the United States of America. Indeed, the only direct flights from Canberra are to Bali in Indonesia, as well as Nadi in Fiji, necessitating the 4 connecting in Los Angeles to take a Qantas flight to Sydney, followed by a Qantas flight to Canberra, with ABC News Australia reporting that the entire trip would take 22 hours. At the time, Australia and the United States of America were served in a duopoly by United and Qantas. With the great relationship between American Airlines and Qantas, and with American Airlines at the time not serving Australia, they were connecting onto the Qantas Boeing 747 to Sydney. At Dulles Airport, she wrote a card to her sister Sarah Guest stating, "Well, we're off to Australia. While we are Oz, email will work best for contacting us." Seated in seat 23D, she was opposite the rest of her family in 23A, B and C. Indeed, row 23 was the only row in economy class and one of the only 2 rows, the other being row 5 in first class, to be fully occupied aboard the Boeing 757. Her remains were found and she was buried in Mount Olivet Cemetery in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. Her mother would pass away on the 23rd of December 2011 and her father would pass away on the 6th of April 2015. Her friend and colleague Professor Bill Gormley stated to ABC News Australia, "She was incredibly charismatic and compelling, and we really, really miss her." Captain John David Yamnicki Sr. was seated in the first row of economy class in seat 9D. Yamnicki was born in South Huntingdon Township in Westmoreland County in Pennsylvania on the 8th of June 1930. He was the son of John Yamnicki and Mari Yamnicki nee Yasko, and had one sister, Mary C. Rutter. Yamnicki would attend McKeesport, Pennsylvania High School, playing football and winning the state championship, as well as playing in the Scholastic Orange Bowl on the 25th of December 1947. He also played basketball and set numerous records as a member of the 880-yard relay team. Attending the U.S. Naval Academy in August 1948, he played in the Naval Academy team, playing in the 1950 Army-Navy game, with the Navy defeating the Army 14-2. He would graduate with a commission as an ensign in the US Navy on the 6th of June 1952. He would serve aboard the attack transport USS Calvert APA-32 from June 1952 until September 1953. During the Korean War, he served as a captain. He would serve aboard the attack transport USS Calvert APA-32 from June 1952 until September 1953 during the Korean War, where he served as captain. He would then attend flight school at NAS Pensacola, Florida, where he was designated as a naval aviator on the 26th of January 1955. He was assigned to the Utility Squadron at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, from January 1955 to April 1957, before joining the Attack Squadron 46 in NAS Cecil, Florida, where he would fly the F-8 Cougar and A-4D2 Skyhawk from April 1957 to December 1959. Yamnicki then served as a replacement air group instructor pilot with VA-44 at NAS Jacksonville, Florida from December 1959 to October 1960, during which time he transitioned to the A-4D2N Skyhawk. He then became a test pilot at NAS Patuxent River, Maryland, from October 1960 to June 1961, before serving as a flight test project officer from June 1961 to October 1963. He then served with the VA-125, the replacement air group at NAS Lemoore in California, flying A-4 Skyhawks from October 1963 to March 1964. Entering the Vietnam War, he would join the VA-146 between June 1964 and 1966, flying some of the first airstrikes in North Vietnam during the Gulf of Tonkin incident. During this time, he flew on the USS Constellation and USS Ranger. In June 1966, he went to the Naval War College in Rhode Island, gaining a master's degree in international relations in June 1967. He then became a replacement pilot at NAS Cecil Field from June to November 1967, before serving as executive officer of VA-172 from November 1968 until October 1969. During this time, he made 2 Mediterranean deployments aboard aircraft carriers USS Franklin D. Roosevelt and USS Shangri-La. He then returned to Squadron 1S2 as an executive officer and later served as a commanding officer. He then served at NAS Patuxent, taking over as director of a test pilot school in May 1972. He then went on to work at the US Navy headquarters in the Pentagon until the 30th of June 1972, when he retired, becoming a consultant to the test center at Patuxent River. He was married to Jan and had 4 children: John David, Lorraine, Mark, and Jennifer. He was also a member of the board of directors of St. Mary's Academy, Riken High School, and Elks Lodge 2092. A devout Roman Catholic, he was also a past Grand Knight and rose to the highest degree of the Knights of Columbus Order, a global Catholic fraternal service order with membership limited to Catholic men. Yamnicki was on board American Airlines Flight 77 on a business trip, heading to work on a missile program in China Lake. At the time of 9/11, he lived in Waldorf, Maryland, 35 miles from Washington Dulles International Airport. He wore an eye patch and was blind in one eye. He was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. His sister Rutter would outlive him and pass away in 2006. His son, John David Yamnicki Jr., passed away on the 13th of May 2024. Vicky Yancey Ni Costanzo was seated in seat 21D in economy class. Yancey was born on the 14th of January 1957 in Newark, New Jersey. At the time of 9/11, she lived in Springfield, Virginia. Yancey was married to David Yancey and had 2 children, Michelle, aged 18, and Caroline, aged 15. Yancey loved politics, figure skating, and the beach. In 1991, she wrote a letter to the Washington Post lamenting the demise of a one-income family, which led to an appearance by her before the Senate Finance Committee, where she testified about the struggles of middle-class families.
My name is Vicki Lynn Yancey. I'm an analyst with a major consulting firm in Washington, D.C. area. I'm 34 years old, college educated, and married with 2 elementary school children.
She worked as a naval electronics technician for Heidenberger, a Washington-based defense contractor. and was on her way to a business conference in Reno, Nevada. To this day, there are no direct flights from Washington, D.C. to Reno, Nevada, necessitating a change either in the middle of the country or flying to the West Coast and heading back into Nevada. Today, however, American Airlines does not fly from Los Angeles to Reno direct, and its regional subsidiary, American Eagle, only flies seasonal from Los Angeles to Reno. She was to fly out on an earlier flight. However, a delayed earlier flight led to her flying aboard the ill-fated Boeing 757. Shu Yin-yang was seated in seat 23E in economy class. Shu Yin-yang was born on the 23rd of January 1939 in Beijing, China. She was travelling with her husband, Yu Gang-zeng, aboard American Airlines Flight 77, and we will come back to him in a minute. She was seated next to her husband. She had one sister, Yang Shuzhen. She had been in Baltimore visiting her daughter, Rui, who had moved to the United States of America in 1999 to undertake a PhD at Johns Hopkins University, and she was on her way, with her husband, back to mainland China. They also had one son, Shidong, who lived in Nagano, Japan. A graduate of the Shanghai Second Medical University, she was a retired pediatrician. She loved cooking, but most of all loved her family. She had been married to Yu Gang-zeng for 35 years. They spent almost a year in Baltimore, and despite their limited English, they made some amazing friends there. They also made their best to learn English, having asked their daughter what words meant, and immediately turned to a dictionary on hearing a new word. The week before 9/11, they visited their son-in-law in Maine. Their daughter dropped them off at Washington Dulles International Airport, and they said how thoroughly they had loved their time with her, and said they would visit her in a few years. Today, Air China flies direct from Beijing to Washington, D.C., while the return leg makes a stopover in Los Angeles. However, at the time, there were no direct flights from Washington, D.C. to China, necessitating a change of aircraft on the West Coast. She was one of 3 citizens of the People's Republic of China to die on 9/11. Rui would tell China Daily in 2006, "I still miss their witty jokes and my mum's cooking." And finally, we have Yu Gang-zeng, who was seated in seat 23C next to his wife, Shu Yin-yang. Zeng was born on the 6th of January 1936 in Beijing, China. Prior to his retirement, he was a pharmacist. He was described as a reserved individual, but loved painting and was accomplished in Tai Chi. He had been in Baltimore visiting his daughter Rui, who had moved to the United States of America in 1999 to undertake a PhD at Johns Hopkins University, and he was on his way back to mainland China. They also had one son, Shidong, who was living in Nagano, Japan, and they had been married for 35 years. They spent almost a year in Baltimore, and despite their limited English, they made some amazing friends there. They also made their best to learn English, having asked their daughter what words meant, and immediately turned to a dictionary on hearing a new word. The week before 9/11, they visited their son-in-law in Maine. Their daughter dropped them off at Washington Dulles International Airport, and they said how thoroughly they had loved their time with her, and said that they would visit her in a few years. Today, Air China flies direct from Beijing to Washington, D.C., while the return leg makes a stopover in Los Angeles. However, at the time, there were no direct flights from Washington, D.C. to China, necessitating a change of aircraft on the West Coast. And that is all of the passengers and crew of American Airlines Flight 77. Thank you for watching. Please do yourself a favour and hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of when new videos come out. Also, why not hit that like button and leave a nice comment? It helps more than you know, and your support is truly appreciated. Until next time, stay awesome, stay classy, be kind to everyone you meet, have an amazing day, and remember the truth is always more interesting than fiction.